Welcome, villagers, to the village hidden in the stories. I'm your guide, All Kage, the creator and author of all the what-if stories you see on this channel, with your awesome suggestions, of course. I write, edit, and produce every story you hear, so if you're wondering who made it, it's me. And I'm back from my long break, well, not really break, more like making these to long parts that shouldn't be this long. I'll try to make sure part 3 and 4 will come out next week, if this video and part 2 does good, that is. But I'm already working on them, so most likely you will get it. I'm glad to be back, and I think Eve found a way to keep posting, but I don't believe it is that balanced. But I will still do it because I love to post my stories. I hope you enjoy today's video. Be sure to leave your what if ideas in the comments and subscribe if you're new. Today's story is, What If Naruto Was Sent to Adventure Time, Part 1. Before we dive in, shout out time. Thanks so much to everyone who comments, keep them coming. And our second shout outs for my Shinobi Patreon members, Omar, Francios Lyman, and Alpha Wolf 1993, a special thanks to them. If you'd like to support the channel, check out my Patreon, link in the description. Now, without further ado, let's jump into this what if. Part 1, Awakening. The soft glow of morning filtered through the pastel curtains, painting the room in gentle shades of pink and gold. Princess Bubblegum lay still for a few moments, her eyes closed, the quiet hum of the Candy Kingdom stirring faintly beyond the walls of her chamber. Outside, the sugar-coated spires sparkled faintly beneath the dawn, but inside her mind, the day was already racing ahead. Her fingers twitched slightly, as if trying to grasp the threads of sleep slipping away. She kept her eyes closed a moment longer, savoring the fleeting quiet that always came just before the world demanded her attention. The room was tidy, almost sterile, decorated with soft candy hues and carefully arranged vials and devices. Reminders of a life built on precision and control. Her chest rose and fell slowly, the weight of countless responsibilities pressing gently against her ribs even in this moment of stillness. Another day to hold together, she thought, another day to pretend the kingdom can last forever. She sat up slowly, the tangled pink hair falling over one shoulder, her pink pale skin glowing softly in the morning light. Her figure was full and curvaceous, with broad shoulders and a strong frame that spoke of hidden power beneath the sweetness. Her generous curves, ample hips and a notably pronounced bust, gave her the presence of someone both regal and grounded, far from the fragile princess one might expect. Every movement carried a quiet strength, like the weight of responsibility made visible in her form. Peace was rare, and she knew it would not last long. Her eyes opened fully and fixed on the ceiling, tracing the delicate cracks and faded candy patterns etched there long ago. Memories flickered unbidden, of friends lost, of battles fought and won, and of promises that never stopped weighing on her mind. I've built this place from sugar and science, but the cracks are always there. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and rested her feet on the cool floor, gathering herself. The quiet was almost unbearable, a fragile pause before the chaos. Because she knew, without doubt, the moment the castle doors would open, her fleeting peace would shatter. The heavy doors of her chamber opened quietly before she could fully rise, and Peppermint Butler entered with his usual grace, gliding through the room like a shadow tethered to her every move. His peppermint swirl face remained unreadable, but his presence was a constant reassurance in the restless rhythm of her days. "Good morning, Princess," he said softly, holding a neatly rolled scroll in one hand and a clipboard bristling with notes in the other. His voice was calm, professional, an anchor amid the chaos she sensed even before the sun rose. "Today's schedule is as packed as ever. There's a diplomatic call scheduled with the Molasses Federation. A recalibration of the northern fence sensors to address yesterday's tremors, and a report from the field on the migration patterns of the sugarworms in Quadrant 8. Princess Bubblegum nodded slowly, her thoughts already racing ahead. She slid her feet into her slippers, the soft touch grounding her as she prepared to step fully into the day. "And the experiments?" she asked, voice steady but threaded with an undercurrent of concern. Peppermint Butler hesitated for a fraction of a second before lowering his tone. "Experiment 67B is unstable again, it's causing minor fires in the sublab. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to warrant immediate attention." her lips pressed tightly together. The weight of her responsibilities settling heavily on her shoulders. "Of course," she murmured, as if the phrase itself could steel her against the endless parade of emergencies. Together, they moved through the pastel-hued halls of the castle, walls adorned with sprawling murals of candy forests, licorice rivers, and gumdrop mountains. The familiar colors and shapes that made up her kingdom's facade felt at once comforting and suffocating, a bittersweet reminder of the world she had shaped and the control she constantly fought to maintain. Soft footsteps echoed down the corridors, guards exchanged quiet greetings, and the hum of enchantments infused the air. The castle breathed with a life of its own. A complex organism built of sugar, science, and willpower. Her mind churned beneath the calm exterior. Every day was a careful calculation, a balance of variables too numerous to count. Each decision she made rippled through her kingdom in ways she both understood and feared. The fragile peace she had engineered teetered on the edge of chaos with every tick of the clock. As they neared the lab, a subtle pulse of unease prickled at the edges of her consciousness. She tried to ignore it, but the sensation persisted, like the faint echo of a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. Pushing open the heavy glass doors, she stepped into the lab, a fusion of alchemy and technology buzzing with relentless energy. Beakers bubbled with iridescent liquids, glowing runes floated above arcane instruments, and tiny mechanical creatures scuttled busily along countertops. The scent of ozone mixed with the faint tang of sugar filled the air. Peppermint Butler was already at the main console, fingers dancing over the controls with practiced efficiency. "Diagnostics are running on the containment fields," he reported without looking up. "So far, everything appears stable. But the readings have been erratic." Princess Bubblegum moved swiftly to a panel displaying fluctuating energy patterns. Her eyes narrowed as she adjusted a dial, watching the erratic spikes smooth into steadier lines. "Leyline fluctuations," she murmured, almost to herself. "Residual energy from the last disturbance, or something else." Her thoughts raced through the possibilities. She was intimately familiar with the delicate web of scientific forces that kept her kingdom alive. She knew how a small ripple could cascade into a flood. As she continued her work, her gaze kept flickering to the corner of the room, where a small monitor blinked with unexplained readings, pulses of energy that defied her calculations. The nagging feeling at the back of her mind grew stronger, an invisible thread pulling at her focus. Peppermint Butler's voice broke through her concentration. "You don't believe this is nothing, do you?" She shook her head slowly, a steely resolve settling into her expression. "No," she said quietly, "but whatever it is, I'll face it, I always do." For a brief moment, she allowed herself to breathe, the burden of the kingdom heavy but manageable. Yet beneath the surface, a question lingered: how long could she keep the world balanced on such fragile foundations before everything came crashing down? Princess Bubblegum stepped back from the console and stretched her shoulders, feeling the tight knot of tension loosen just a little. She glanced over at Peppermint Butler, who was quietly observing her with those inscrutable eyes. "You know," she said, "these little breaks, they're necessary. Otherwise, I'd forget what normal feels like." Peppermint Butler's swirl face twitched in what might have been a smile. "It's the briefest chance to breathe in the eye of the storm." She nodded. "Exactly, I'm glad I have you to share them with, you always seem to know when I need the pause." He tipped his head slightly, acknowledging the rare compliment without fuss. She looked out a nearby window, watching the soft candy hues of the kingdom bathed in morning light. For a few seconds, the world felt still and safe, the hum of the lab, the quiet bustle of the castle, it all seemed like a fragile gift she wasn't ready to lose. But then, her thoughts darkened, something niggled at the edges. A sensation like a shadow slipping through the cracks, too quiet, too perfect, something's coming. Her eyes snapped back to Peppermint Butler. "Send someone to check the southern tunnels," she said sharply. "There's been an unusual energy spike." Before he could reply, a low, violent boom echoed from the outer edge of the Candy Kingdom, shaking the castle walls and rattling the windows. The ground trembled beneath their feet as distant debris sounded off. Peppermint Butler's voice was steady but urgent. "Princess, that came from the Western Parklands, I'm dispatching a scout team immediately. Bubblegum's gaze hardened. Okay, just make sure they don't freak anyone out, we can't have another outbreak. The princess was already on high alert, hoping it wasn't one of those dangers, rare, but disruptive enough to throw her kingdom into disarray. Not always deadly, no, but costly, unpredictable. And usually her responsibility to fix. What she didn't know, however, was that this tremor wasn't one of the usual anomalies, it was the start of something entirely different, something ancient, something chaotic, something that would shift the tide of OOO forever. Far across the Candy Kingdom, in one of its many sugary parks, the ground suddenly erupted. The earth split with a deep, echoing boom, sending a geyser of power bursting upward. A single explosion ripped through the sweet soil, swing sets were launched into the sky like twigs. Slides twisted midair before crashing back down, and the nearby monkey bars collapsed like they were made of melted licorice. When the chaos settled, it left behind a gaping crater, jagged, uneven, and deep. The sugary terrain had been torn open to reveal dirt of a strange, chocolate brown. It shimmered oddly, unnaturally. The pit sat quiet for a moment, then the dirt began to shift. It slithered and crumbled, as if something below was moving. Then came another burst, dirt exploded outward again as an unseen force pushed its way to the surface. Something was rising. Slowly, steadily, a figure began to emerge. First his hand, then his arm, then, head first like a corpse clawing out of a grave, a blond man rose from the crater. Blinking into the sunlight. He moved like someone caught between sleep and instinct, not entirely dead, but not exactly alive, either. And in truth, for a man like him, the difference hardly mattered anymore. As he pushed himself free from the earth, he paused, and tasted the dirt. Sweet, he blinked again, chewing. Huh. He stood. Now fully revealed, he was tall, about 5 feet 11 inches, just shy, as he often told himself, of basketball height. He wore a long orange jacket that dipped into a cloak behind him, unzipped to show a blank white shirt beneath. His hood was black, like the accents running down his sleeves and shoulders. Loose black pants and orange shinobi sandals gave him an almost ancient, wandering warrior air. His hair was wild, long, spiky, and golden, trailing all the way down to his lower back, hiding the red whirlpool symbol printed on his cloak. His face was youthful in structure, heart-shaped, but something was off. His eyes glowed red, slitted like a fox's, 3 whisker marks carved each cheek, and his expression, more than anything else, carried a weariness that didn't belong to this world. This was Naruto Uzumaki. The immortal sage, tamer of the tailed beasts, destroyer of chakra, the black flame of the shinobi, and depending on who you asked, maybe a walking apocalyptic event. He had been asleep for a very, very long time. No one could say what stirred him. Not yet, but now that he was awake, he wasn't sure he liked what he saw. The world around him, colorful, twisted, sweet, was unlike anything he remembered. Too cheerful, too artificial, it didn't feel real. Then again, he'd lived long enough to know that sometimes, the strangest places were the most dangerous, and the quietest worlds hid the loudest truths. Naruto glanced around at the empty park, the destruction he'd unintentionally caused, and let out a soft sigh. Of course, he muttered. Nothing's ever simple anymore. Naruto stepped out of the crater, his boots crunching into the scorched edges of sweet-smelling dirt. Bits of caramelized debris slid off his cloak as he rose. Stretching his arms and rolling his shoulders with a low grunt, like someone waking from the best nap of their life, or maybe the longest. How long was I out, he muttered to himself, glancing skyward like the answer might be scribbled in the clouds. The light was, strange, not quite natural, not quite artificial. Felt like a century. Peace really does put you to sleep. That had been the idea, after all. Semi-peaceful nations, not any long-lasting wars, or wars that he had to involve himself in, no more chakra. It was all, just silence, the kind that settles after you've made yourself obsolete on purpose. He'd thought it was smart, no one left to fight, no one left to save. Just him and the earth, buried deep in a tomb of his own making. But something had yanked him back up, a jolt of energy, foreign, wild, and annoyingly persistent. It gnawed at the edges of his senses even now, humming under the surface like static behind his thoughts. Naruto squinted. Whatever it wasn't subtle. He glanced back at the crater behind him, then to the blasted park that had once held children's laughter. Swings and candy-coated playground equipment now lay in mangled heaps. Marshmallow benches cracked in half, gumdrop trees wept syrup. He blinked, then said flatly, "This place is weird." Taking a few steps forward, Naruto scratched the back of his head. Surveying the landscape like a guy who had just been dropped into someone else's hallucination. Chocolate-paved streets, jellybean rooftops, buildings shaped like pastries. Did I wake up in Candyland or someone's fever dream? A wind blew past, sweet and sticky, his eyebrow twitched. "Okay, first order of business," he said aloud, starting to count on his fingers. "Figure out where I am. Second, check if cars are still a thing. Third, see if anyone's made a new console since the last one I beat. And fourth," he let his hand drop as his eyes narrowed, sharpening. "Figure out what the hell pulled me out." The last part stuck in his teeth like an itch. Something had called to him. Not chakra, not nature energy, something else. Something that didn't exist when he went under, a ripple in a still pond. He didn't like it. "Maybe there's someone to fight," he muttered, turning in place. He half hoped there wasn't. But he also knew better. Trouble didn't knock when you had chakra like his. It kicked the door off the hinges. His eyes scanned the skyline again. Somewhere in the distance, soft sirens began to echo, followed by the rush of feet. Naruto grinned faintly, shadows stretching beneath him as if responding to the spark of motion. "Well, I guess someone noticed." As soon as the words left his mouth, Naruto felt it, movement. A ripple in the air, a soft stomping rhythm growing louder around him. He glanced up. The edge of the destroyed park was no longer empty. A circle had formed, a bright, banana-yellow wall boxing him in. Only, it wasn't a wall, or even a formation. It was a crowd. Dozens, no, maybe hundreds, of strange yellow-bodied figures surrounded the crater. They had wooden stick legs, goofy chocolate-dipped heads, and spears that gleamed blue at the tips. Every single one of them looked nearly identical, expressionless, wide-eyed, and holding their weapons like kids on their first day of camp. Well, all except one. That one had an excited grin before getting slapped upside the head by his neighbors. He quickly wiped the smile off his face and tried to look serious. Standing at stiff attention like the rest. Naruto blinked slowly. This place just keeps getting weirder. He turned to glance behind him. The whole park was surrounded now. Who even are these guys? Is this just what people look like now? Before he could get an answer, one of the banana men stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice was high and squeaky, like someone pinching a kazoo. "Unidentified monster, we are the Banana Guard." "You idiot," another one snapped, "you're not supposed to tell him that." "Oh, my bad." "Wait, what were we doing again?" "We're detaining this guy for the princess, remember, we're the guard." "No, I'm not, I was just made yesterday." Naruto's expression didn't change. But the corner of his eye twitched. What was he even supposed to do with that? Every answer led to 3 more questions. Are they clones? Who's building these guys? Why are they so dumb? And more importantly, did they say princess? Now that part caught his attention. If there was someone actually in charge, maybe he could get a straight answer. Then again, these guys clearly wanted to take him in, and Naruto wasn't exactly in the mood to be interrogated straight out of a nap. He sighed, running a hand down his face. Figures, not even 10 minutes up, and I'm already in trouble with the law. The Banana Guard was still arguing amongst themselves. One started to poke another in the side with his spear, which led to a slap fight that spilled into 3 others. Naruto finally raised his voice. "Can you all just shut up so we can talk?" That stopped them. For a moment. Then they all turned toward him with narrowed eyes. "That's not very nice," one of them shouted back, clearly offended. Naruto groaned, "I'm just saying, let's talk, I don't even know why you guys are after me." One of the guards stepped forward, nodding like he was proud of himself for remembering. Well, the princess told us about a big boom. And since we needed a win today, we all decided if we found anyone in the blast zone, we'd take them in. That's it? Yep. Naruto raised an eyebrow, utterly baffled. That's the dumbest arrest warrant I've ever heard. So, can I just talk to this princess instead? The banana guard exchanged glances. Then one of them gasped, he's resisting arrest. Wait, what? Get him. The moment those words exploded from one of the banana guards, Naruto's breath hitched, then sharpened. He didn't need to hear it twice. His body moved before thought could catch up, chakra-spiked instincts firing like flint on steel. He pivoted, then launched himself straight into the air with a single pulse of his legs, his foot landing with a squelchy thud atop one of the banana guard's chocolate-capped heads. The creature wobbled under his weight, wooden stick legs buckling. He's on me, the guard squealed in a voice that sounded like a kazoo in distress. But Naruto was already gone, springboarding off him like a step on a broken staircase, soaring to the next, then the next. Yellow head squished beneath his sandals as he skipped across the circle of bodies, turning the crowd into his personal trampoline course. Each impact left streaks of syrup and angry banana-shaped dents. He's bouncing on us. Is that allowed? Tactical disrespect. Naruto didn't respond, he was grinning. He hit the ground running, sandals slapping the hardened sugar pavement as he blitzed through the cracked remains of what had once been a park. The earth still steamed behind him, the crater yawning like a bomb had gone off, because it had. That was his wake-up call. Now this was his morning cardio. Behind him, the banana guard stumbled for a heartbeat, then rallied in a shrieking, squeaky war cry. Get the intruder. A tidal wave of yellow surged after him, all stubby arms and javelin-sized spears tipped with sparkling blue crystal. Their legs clicked like drumsticks against the ground, a full-on stampede of sugar soldiers that sounded like wooden xylophones gone mad. Naruto tore through the cobblestone streets, eyes darting left and right. The kingdom around him was, there was no other word for it, bizarre. Buildings shaped like frosted cakes towered over the streets, their icing windows glowing soft pink and mint green. Street lamps were molten candy canes. A billboard advertised Gumball Guardian's annual picnic. A bus rolled by which was surprisingly one of the only things that was normal, that and the one or two rare cars on the road, but the people. He passed a man made entirely of jelly beans arguing with a woman shaped like a gingerbread bunny. A taffy creature tipped his hat at him politely as Naruto zipped by, then turned and screamed as the banana guard thundered behind. A caramel-plated dog barked and gave chase too, just because. Is everyone here made of candy? Naruto muttered aloud. Ducking under a rainbow-striped clothesline that dripped with drying lollipops. He skid across a frosting-slick crosswalk, barely keeping his footing. Okay, this ain't a genjutsu, this is way too stupid for that. He dipped down an alley framed by walls of rock candy and swung around a vending machine that dispensed nothing but different-colored gumdrops. Somewhere above, an overhead sprinkle system kicked on, showering everything in syrup rain. What the hell kind of ecosystem is this, he thought. Every step was chaos. He clipped the edge of a fudge crate, sent it spinning into a candy corn merchant stand, which erupted in a loud explosion of confectionery confetti. My life savings, the vendor cried as jelly coins scattered. Sorry, Naruto called back without looking. Even as he weaved through the chaos, his sharp mind was piecing together what little information he had. This has to be artificial. Manufactured. Maybe a massive genjutsu city, maybe something worse. No way biology did this, not without help. Or, he considered grimly, maybe people really had evolved into walking desserts while he'd been asleep. He shook the thought from his head, no time to unpack that trauma. Another corner, he nearly slammed into a molasses-coated food cart, veering just in time to avoid crashing through what looked like a literal jelly wall. His breath was steady, pace relentless, the chase had a rhythm now. He ducked, flipped, vaulted, slid. His movement was fluid, too fluid for the guards to keep up. But the more distance he covered, the more of them there were. Every street corner he turned, a new squad of banana guards appeared. They popped out from behind gingerbread mailboxes, spilled out of ice cream trucks, even rappelled from cotton candy rooftops like some kind of fruity SWAT team. Naruto glanced back and counted, at least 30, maybe 40 now, and growing fast. What, are they grown in trees or something? He grunted. They were gaining on him again. He picked up the pace, heart hammering, but not from fear. Excitement shimmered behind his eyes. This felt good, familiar, even if the enemies were literal walking bananas with attitude problems. He's turning down Gumdrop Lane. I got eyes on him. Sector Fudge Ripple, mobilize, mobilize. Wait, which way is left again? Naruto nearly doubled over laughing mid-run. You guys are dumber than my clones. Still, he didn't slow. He had no idea where he was going, no map, no escape route, no vantage point. Just candy civilians yelling, banana guards shouting orders that made no sense, and a city that looked like a kid's fever dream. But if there was a princess giving these guys orders, then odds were good she was in a palace. He'd just have to run around blind until he found it. Come on, Naruto, he muttered under his breath, ducking under another spear. Wake up in a weird world, get chased by bananas, what else is new? He pivoted mid-sprint, flipped over a licorice fountain, and darted into a plaza shaped like a giant jellybean. The chase was still on, but now, he was enjoying himself. Naruto vaulted over a low-hanging gumdrop garland and landed in a smooth skid along a marbled sugar plaza, his sandals sliding briefly before he kicked off again with effortless grace. His pace hadn't slowed, not really, but his focus had shifted. The chase had lost its edge. What had started as a thrilling sprint through candy-coated chaos had slowly begun to dull at the edges. Too many turns, too many streets that twisted back into themselves. He couldn't tell if this place had a layout or if the designers had just spilled syrup on a city blueprint and called it good. He didn't even know which direction he'd come from anymore. That was the thing about running blind. Eventually, you stopped escaping and started looping. And that's when it hit him, I'm not getting out of here like this. He ducked under another airborne spear and sprang onto a caramel bench, then into a forward flip that carried him clean over a group of approaching guards. Midair, he let himself breathe. He could feel it again, his instincts, tuning sharper by the second. His steps were lighter. More exact. He didn't even touch the food carts now, where once he barreled through, now he bent around them, slipping through tight spaces with just the right angle, clearing fences in strides that felt second nature. His body remembered everything. The world blurred around him, syrup-sweet wind racing past as he cut through a cotton candy archway and slid beneath a hanging string of jellybean lanterns. Even so. He exhaled. Yeah, he muttered to himself, this is starting to drag. It wasn't that he couldn't keep going, he could probably outrun these banana-headed guards for the rest of the day if he wanted to. But he wasn't learning anything new. No signs, no exits, no mountains on the horizon. Just more whimsical nonsense and pastel chaos. And the guards? They just kept popping up, like they were being respawned from thin air. He ducked down a winding candy cane alley, pausing behind a gumball dumpster. He crouched there for a heartbeat, just enough time to catch his breath, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to think. They must have a leader if one of them said about a princess. Maybe even a clear leader, or maybe the princess was the leader. A kingdom this weird has to have someone in charge, and if they're the ones giving orders, maybe they're smart enough to talk. He smirked. Or weird enough to be entertaining. He could already picture it, a throne made of licorice. Walls made of frosting, maybe a queen with marshmallow eyes and a taffy crown. Or hell, maybe this princess was just some manic little kid who never grew out of her sweet tooth, wouldn't surprise him. Still, if anyone knew what was going on, or how he got here, it was probably her. I'm not getting answers out here, he flexed his hands, cracked his neck once, so, guess I'll take the meeting. Footsteps closed in, more squeaky shouting. We've got him cornered, all units converge, surround the alley, and no, not like that. Naruto rolled his eyes and stood. All right, he muttered with a grin, raising both hands lazily behind his head, time to get arrested. He walked out from behind the dumpster like he was coming back from a smoke break. The banana guard didn't know what to do. They froze, their formation breaking into a cartoonish tangle of elbows and spears and squished toes. A few slipped on their own footing. One tripped, fell into another, and knocked 3 over like sticky dominoes. Naruto just stared at them, unimpressed. "You done?" The nearest one puffed up his chest. "Why, you're surrounded, stay where you are." "I am staying," Naruto said with a shrug. "What, you want me to sit down too?" They blinked. "Hands where we can see them," another barked. "They're on my head." Drop to your knees." Naruto raised an eyebrow, "You sure about that one?" He rolled his eyes and sighed, "Look. Just take me to your leader, alright, preferably the princess one of you spoke of earlier." The guards all looked at each other, confused. Then one, a bit taller than the rest with a slightly bruised peel, finally stepped forward and jabbed a spear at him awkwardly. "You're under arrest for park destruction, and unauthorized city leaping." Naruto chuckled, "Yeah, lead the way, banana boys." As they nervously formed a loose perimeter and began to march him through the plaza, Naruto took in the city with a different eye. Now that he wasn't sprinting, the layout, still ridiculous, felt more deliberate. There was an order to it. A hidden structure beneath all the sugar and sprinkles. He took mental notes with every step. The guards talked like idiots, but their routes were too fast, their response time too sharp. This place had organization. And the way they snapped to attention whenever the word princess came up. Yeah, Naruto thought, she's the one pulling strings, hope she's enough for me to figure out how much the world has changed. He grinned again as the palace walls rose in the distance, glistening like a castle-shaped birthday cake, time to figure out how the hell he got into a world made of dessert, or at least get a snack. The air in the throne room was sweet, but still. Too still. Princess Bubblegum sat at the far end, legs crossed at the ankle. Elbow resting on one arm of her plush licorice throne. A floating display scrolled lazily beside her, detailing a dozen experiments left half completed. Chemical structures, security reports, a few grainy stills of the latest Gumball Guardian misfire. But her eyes weren't on any of it. They were distant. Focused on nothing, the kind of stare she reserved for when her brain was chewing on too many questions at once. "I wonder if Peppermint Butler has a report yet, I gotta figure out why a crater suddenly appeared in a random park." Boom, she thought again. The sound had rattled half the upper candy corn district. No ordinary explosion, not even from her own labs, had ever felt like that. There'd been a pulse to it, a thrum. A tap at the gum-glass doors snapped her from thought. "Your Majesty," a banana guard bumbled in, tripping over his own wooden feet. He skidded to a stop, saluted backwards, and nearly poked himself in the eye with his spear. She closed her tablet. "Report. We found someone, in the Marshmallow Park, at the blast zone," he said, panting. "He was all gore and whoosh, and then he ran on our heads and didn't follow arrest protocols, none of them." "You tried to arrest him?" she asked, one brow raised with the cool precision of someone who already suspected the answer wouldn't satisfy. "Yes," he resisted, then unresisted, the banana guard replied. Saluting stiffly, "So we detained him." Bubblegum stood slowly, brushing powdered sugar from her gloves. "Name?" The guard's candy-coated face twitched. She stared. "I'll take that as a no," she muttered. "No, ma'am," he admitted, wilting slightly. With a quiet sigh, Bubblegum turned, voice clipped, "Show me." The descent into the lower dungeon brought a shift in the air, thicker, quieter, less sweet. Down here, the walls weren't bright peppermint or playful marzipan, but hard, resinous gumdrop brick, each one lacquered in a glaze that gave the illusion of wetness, like it had never fully dried. The dull red hue of security lights bled along the corridor like sluggish veins, pulsing against the crystalline bars of the cells. As she approached, the banana guard stationed at the door stiffened, shifting awkwardly like children who'd broken something valuable. They stepped aside without a word. And there he was. seated comfortably against the back wall like it was a throne carved just for him. Legs stretched out in a lazy sprawl, elbows balanced on his knees, one hand loosely dangling. He looked completely at ease. Like a man who chose to be in a candy dungeon for the view. Princess Bubblegum's brows drew together, just slightly. He looked human. But something about that didn't sit right. The air around him, it wasn't magical. It wasn't mechanical. It was something else entirely, thicker, denser, like the gravity was different where he Saturday, not evil, but wild, untamed. Unpredictable. His eyes were closed, breathing slow and measured, as if meditating or sleeping. But even then, she could feel it, something curled beneath that stillness, something older than older than her. Looks a little like Finn, she murmured under her breath. The resemblance was there, blonde hair, lean figure, that same effortless, misplaced confidence boys his age always wore before the world cracked it out of them. But that's where the similarities ended. Where Finn was light, this one was shadow. Not in a sinister way, just worn. Weathered. Like he'd been in battles no one else survived, and walked away laughing. Even his hair, closer to burnished gold than blonde, was wild and tangled, like it hadn't felt a comb in years, not messy from carelessness, but from freedom. And the way he Saturday, that was what really did it. He wasn't afraid, wasn't angry, wasn't curious. He was bored. As if the Candy Kingdom was just another stop in a long, strange journey he hadn't asked to be on. Her fingers tightened around her clipboard. Who are you, she wondered, and what are you doing in my kingdom? She dismissed the banana guards with a wave. This was something she needed to handle personally. Not because she trusted the prisoner. Because she didn't. And technically, he wasn't guilty of anything yet, he'd been taken in because the guards had acted on their own, even if he was standing at the crater. They hadn't even expected for someone like the man to have been in there, but even so. Finding someone in a crater didn't make them dangerous. But it made them interesting. And that made them worth questioning. She stepped closer to the cell, arms folding behind her back, posture straight and formal, precisely controlled. She needed to get this right, to understand him before letting him walk free. I wanted to speak with you personally, she began, voice smooth, diplomatic. You were found at what we call Site Zero, where the explosion occurred. At that, the man opened his eyes, brilliant red, slitted faintly like a fox's, and tilted his head. A grin curled across his lips, wry and untamed. He shifted, standing with slow, casual grace and leaning one arm lazily through the bars like he'd done this 100 times before. You're not what I expected, he said, eyes scanning her with amused interest. You almost look human, except for the candy-colored skin. Bubblegum raised an eyebrow. What exactly were you expecting? He chuckled, dunno, maybe someone made out of licorice whips or gum taffy, a literal candy queen. His grin widened, not a woman who somehow makes this much pink look that good. She blinked, the bluntness caught her off guard. And she didn't like that. I'm assuming you're the princess, right? He added, voice teasing, like he already knew the answer but wanted to see how she'd say it. Bonnie hesitated for the first time. Most people in OOO recognized her, even those from far-flung kingdoms. But he wasn't just playing dumb. He looked at her like someone flipping through an unfamiliar book, page by page. Was it a trick, or was he being sincere? Either way, it didn't matter, not right now, she'd find his background later. Anyway, she said, straightening, I know you were wrongfully detained, my guards can be. Airhead, he offered with a grin. She gave him a tight smile, not denying it. However, you've caused substantial damage to my kingdom. Some of it was incited by the banana guards, yes, but the majority was your doing. So, in exchange for waiving any fees or charges, I'd like to ask you a few questions. He tilted his head, thoughtful for a beat. Then, slowly, he withdrew his arm from the bars like he'd decided something. That grin never left, if anything, it grew sharper. Smarter. More dangerous. Sure, he said. Ask away, but I get to ask you some too. His tone was light, but underneath it was something that made her pause, playful, but twisted in that same way all tricksters were. Wizards, especially, that hint of perversity, that hunger for games. Bubblegum's eyes narrowed. She'd seen this before, and it never ended well. Except, this wasn't magic, or if it was something deeper, something older. It felt like being pulled into a game she didn't know the rules to. And that worried her more than anything. Still, she gave a slight nod. Very well, but I'll go first, and I can't guarantee I'll answer everything you ask. His smile didn't falter. Sounds fair, he said. But Bubblegum had the unsettling feeling she'd already agreed to something much bigger than she realized. We'll start with something simple, she said evenly, her voice a careful balance of diplomacy and quiet authority. Like your name, so I don't have to keep referring to you as that guy. The man chuckled, an easy, rough sound that echoed off the candy-coated walls. Shouldn't you give yours first? Kinda rude asking someone for their name without offering yours, just manners, you know? Bubblegum blinked. He sounded sincere, like he genuinely didn't know who she was. You may call me Princess Bubblegum, she replied, her tone professional, though her brow furrowed slightly. As most people in and out of the kingdom do. That's a weird fake name, he said, tilting his head lazily. Why so secret? She paused, uncertain whether the man was joking or genuinely oblivious. Judging by the glint in his eye, it was both, but still, she answered. In the land of OOO. Names carry weight, she explained. Power. No princess uses her real name in public, only with those we trust. Our names can be used in spells, barters, or worse, and since I don't know you. Got it, the man nodded, processing it. So it's like magical identity theft, kinda hot. Should I be hiding mine too, or do I just not matter enough? Bubblegum frowned. No, you're not a political target, it's more a precaution for royalty. Cool, good to know. He leaned more comfortably on the bars, letting one arm dangle through again. In that case, Naruto. She raised an eyebrow. No last name? Been years since I used it, he said with a casual shrug. Most of the titles that came with it got left behind or buried. Like everything else. She made a mental note of that, left behind or buried, but chose not to press, yet. Alright, Naruto, she said. What were you doing at the park when it exploded? I was under the park when it exploded, he corrected with a smirk. And for the record, that blast wasn't half as jarring as the sight of you in that dress. Like, how is that thing holding back your chest, pure gumtech or just royal defiance? That's, she closed her eyes for a beat. I'm going to pretend you didn't say any of that. What happened before the explosion? Wouldn't know, I was asleep, out cold, in the ground. She stared, expression flat. You woke up during the explosion? It was me. When I woke up in the dirt, I made myself a way out, wouldn't want to stay under forever, you know. He stretched like it was all a mild inconvenience. Got to say, thought I was dreaming at first when waking up and seeing those banana guys surrounding me. Why were you buried here, of all places? Didn't exactly pick the spot, he said, shrugging again. Just found a free, open area, then dug myself a hole to sleep. Guess after a few years the free and open space wasn't so free and open anymore. I was dormant, sleeping off a lifetime or two. Her eyes narrowed again. That would explain your lack of knowledge about modern customs. You're not familiar with OOO, are you? Got to ask, what's OOO? He asked, genuinely. Exactly, she folded her arms. You must have been underground for a very long time. Long enough to miss the rise of fruit people. Yeah, he grinned. Still, not the worst place I've woken up, though I wouldn't have minded waking up under something warmer. She shot him a look, one part disgust, one part disbelief. Why are you being so open about this? That kind of information could cause massive waves, literally and figuratively. You're a human, a long-buried one. That's something you should keep quiet. I don't care much about secrecy, Naruto said, tone still light but eyes suddenly sharper. I like things straight. If I want something, I say it. If I know something, I might tell you. depends on how fun the conversation is. Fun, her expression soured again. This is an investigation, not a flirtation. He gave a sly smile. Then you're asking the wrong guy, I'm kinda good at multitasking. Princess Bubblegum took a slow, measured breath. Focus. Fine, last question, for now. A few days ago, there was a massive energy surge some tunnels under the kingdom. Did you cause it? Naruto leaned in close enough for the security sensors to flicker red. His grin didn't fade. Wasn't even awake, but if I had been, maybe, I'd love to send a surge through something, if you're offering. Her jaw clenched. I'm done with questions, she said tightly. Ah, already, he said with mock disappointment. I've barely started mine. Like, are those banana guys grown or manufactured, and are you technically made of bubblegum? 'Cause if so, you're definitely the most stretchable royal I've seen. She turned and started walking. Oh, and why a princess, not a queen? He called after her. You're clearly in charge, or is it a fashion thing, you know, cuter title, better PR? I'm not indulging that, she said over her shoulder. Enjoy your cell, Naruto. I'd enjoy it more if you stayed, and wait, I thought you were gonna let me out. She didn't respond, but as the metal door closed behind her, Naruto chuckled to himself and stretched again, completely relaxed. Well, that answered a couple of questions, Naruto muttered, slouching back against the wall of his cell. A sudden, booming laugh erupted from his chest, deep, loud, unrestrained. It echoed down the empty corridor as he threw his head back and laughed like someone who just heard the punchline to a joke only he understood. Then, with a breathy sigh, he calmed, shoulders still shaking with aftershocks of amusement. So I woke up in a time way different than my own, he said aloud, as if confirming it for himself. And from what that princess said, this land is called Oo. He let the name roll off his tongue, testing it, weird, but fun. The grin tugging at his lips grew wider as he mulled it over. The conversation hadn't been as fruitful as he'd hoped. The princess was smart, cagey, not the type to give up valuable information easily. But even so, he'd picked up more than she probably intended. For starters, he now knew where he was, the Candy Kingdom. Though, from the view out the narrow window of his cell, it looked less like a proper kingdom and more like a dense, colorful city. Neon-bright buildings, syrupy roads, and citizens shaped like lollipops and gumdrops. It was weird, surreal, cartoonish, but kind of charming. From that same window, Naruto had seen more than just sugar-coated streets. To the north stretched a vast forest, birds flying overhead, chirping joyfully as they cut through the sky before vanishing into what he now called the grasslands. Green, vibrant, unnaturally lush, like someone had painted the landscape with too much saturation. To the far side of the kingdom, the scenery changed dramatically. Jagged peaks of ice pierced the clouds, with cold winds howling across frozen hills. A tundra of uneven terrain, whipping snow, and the distant shimmer of ice magic. It felt chaotic, haunted. He could almost smell the madness in the wind. Two drastically different places, and most likely, there were more. Yep, he whispered to himself, this world's got potential. From the princess's brief comments, it was clear she wasn't the only royal in this strange time. In fact, royalty seemed common. Organized, even, but what really stuck with him was what she'd said about names, how they carried power, could be used in spells. Which meant one thing, magic was back. Not chakra, he could feel the difference, whatever this was, it didn't hum with the same flow, the same balance and pull he'd trained with. It was wilder. Less structured, it buzzed faintly in the air, like static before a storm. Foreign, but alive. Wizards, he muttered. They made a comeback, huh? He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing it in. The world had changed. And oddly enough, that didn't make him anxious, it thrilled him. It invited him. Naruto chuckled again, his voice low and rough. They really thought they could trap me in here. The chains, the locks, the banana guards, none of it mattered. He could slip out any time he wanted, but why rush? He wanted to see what this world had to offer. He wanted to play, explore, push buttons, raise eyebrows. He hadn't felt this alive in years. Man. I hope this place doesn't get boring, he said with a grin. Or I'm going back to sleep, or maybe I'll shoot myself into space just to find something interesting. He paused, considering that seriously for a second, before shaking his head. Nah, one step at a time, Naruto, one step. His fingers tapped against the stone ledge, gaze drifting back out the window. The birds had returned, gliding low above the rooftops, casting brief shadows over the city made of candy. First, explore, then, his eyes gleamed. Let's see just how much fun OOO has to offer. The cell was quiet again, the silence wasn't new, but this time, it felt loaded. Naruto sat cross-legged, still in the middle of the floor. Eyes half-lidded, calm, but under that calm, a storm churned. He took a breath, slow and steady, raising his palm in front of his face. Then he felt for it. For his chakra. It responded immediately. Like a long-lost predator finally catching the scent of blood. A thick, black aura bled from his fingertips, slow at first, curling like smoke from dying coals. Then more poured out, engulfing his hand. The chakra was deep and cold, not the warmth of sunlight but the heavy shroud of moonless nights. It didn't shine, it swallowed the light around it. It was like holding death itself. His fingers twitched, and his expression turned unreadable. His red eyes darkened, the rings within his irises pulsing faintly. Sage energy? Something else, the lines between were blurry now. And then, the chakra twisted. Coalescing into a spiraling ball of darkness, a void-like orb spinning in his palm, hungry for destruction. The Rasengan, corrupted and modified by time, silence, and stillness. He didn't hesitate. With a savage grin and no warning, Naruto slammed it into the wall of his cell. The impact was instant, stone cracked, then shattered, exploding outward in a deafening roar. The hole left behind wasn't clean, it looked like a wild animal had torn through it. Dust settled in the hallway, alarms blared, but Naruto was already gone. He moved like a shadow with a pulse, blazing forward, eyes bright again with crimson joy. His smirk widened as his hair whipped in the wind and his red eyes returned to their usual, chaotic hue. This is more like it, he muttered, launching himself from one building to another. Candy citizens screamed below, but he didn't stop, didn't slow, didn't care. The wind tasted like freedom. One final leap, and he was sailing high above the outer wall of the Candy Kingdom, limbs relaxed midair like he'd done it 1,000 times before. He landed hard, a small crater forming beneath his feet as he hit the grassy plains outside. The open land stretched for miles, the air fresh and wild. Naruto rolled his shoulders with a grin. His eyes scanned the horizon. All right. Let's see what the world's hiding. Then he ran. No plan, no direction, just a blur of orange, red, and black streaking across the green. Thoughts buzzed in his mind, flashes of what he'd learned, glimpses of what might lie ahead. He passed a massive treehouse, strange and towering. He slowed for a moment, eyes narrowing, but didn't stop. It wasn't calling to him, not yet at least. He dove into a dark forest, trees gnarled and thick, the canopy swallowing the sky. Shadows danced across his face as he finally came to a stop and leaned against the side of a mossy rock, letting the adrenaline settle. Breath misting in the cooler air, he muttered, that run was fun, but nothing crazy's happened yet. He frowned, eyes glinting in the dim light. Maybe I should have gone the other way, that snowy place looked promising. Then, a sound. A sharp flutter of wings. And a voice. Playful. Amused. Maybe a little intrigued. You shouldn't be in such a dark place to cutie, something might jump out at you. Naruto froze mid-step, his back to the voice, a beat passed, then his grin crept back up, slow and wolfish. He turned his head, red eyes gleaming with interest. And then something lunged from the trees above. A beast, huge and inky black, descended upside down in front of him. Coated in thick fur, limbs too long and jointed wrong, wings like leather stretched across bone. Blue eyes, blank and glowing, rimmed in red. Rows of jagged teeth split its snout as it opened its mouth in a silent snarl. It hung from the tree like a grotesque ornament, swaying slightly. Naruto tilted his head, unfazed. "Was that supposed to scare me?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Because, I've seen worse, way worse." The thing blinked. Then it laughed. The deep, guttural growl warped into something smoother, still dark, still raspy, but now laced with mischief. Like someone who knew they'd just been caught mid-prank and loved every second of it. The monstrous form shimmered and twisted, folding in on itself. Fur faded, wings melted into skin, and in its place, floating lazily in the air, was a woman. A very pretty one. Long black hair that flowed unnaturally in the still air. Sharp red eyes that studied him like a puzzle piece she wanted to snap into place. Pale skin that caught the moonlight in silver streaks. Her frame was lean but curved, elegant more than exaggerated, opposite of that sugar-coated pink princess from earlier. It wasn't to say he didn't like the bubblegum's figure, hell he loved big boobs. Anyway, tight gray tank top, worn blue jeans with cuts across the thighs, scuffed up black sneakers, effortless danger. Naruto let his eyes roam, but not subtly, and when they landed back on hers, he smirked. "Damn," the woman said through a lingering laugh. "That head tilt was the cutest thing I've seen in a while." She floated closer, flipped herself upright, and then reclined midair like she was laying across some invisible sofa. Just hovering, inches in front of him. "I didn't expect you to be so straight-faced," she said with a sly smile. "Caught me off guard." Naruto rolled his shoulders. "Takes a lot to rattle me." "Clearly," she replied. "Most people scream when I drop out of the trees, or pee, or scream and pee. I get a full range." Naruto chuckled and gave her a sideways look. Maybe they just aren't used to hot women trying to maul them. She didn't flinch, just slowly rolled onto her back, still floating. "Flattery." She purred. "Careful, I bite." "Only if you promise not to stop," he teased back, voice low and wicked. They locked eyes, silent for half a second, then both broke into laughter. Hers was husky, wild. His was a sharp crack, rough and full of chaos. "You're bold," she said, propping herself up on one elbow midair. "Very bold. Most people don't flirt with the vampire queen." That made him pause. He looked her over again with fresh eyes. The fangs, the floating, the whole damn vibe. "Vampire queen, huh?" he muttered. "Makes sense, movies were just starting to get good at those before I went to sleep." She quirked an eyebrow. "Sleep? You don't look like a sleepyhead." "Oh, I slept like the dead," Naruto said casually. "Centuries maybe, give or take an apocalypse." She floated a bit closer. "You're serious?" "As serious as a heart attack during a funeral," he grinned. She studied him again, this time with more interest. He wasn't bluffing, and she could tell. "So you must have slept through the worst of a few thousand years ago," she said quietly, more to herself than him. "Other than a certain friend, I didn't think humans were still kicking around, at least not here." "Well," Naruto said, hands behind his head, "I'm not really kicking. More like dancing between the graves." Another pause, another shared grin. They were the same kind of strange. He liked that. "You're a bold one, very bold. Not many people flirt with the vampire queen herself." Naruto blinked. "Vampire queen?" His eyes roamed again, pale skin like porcelain, fangy smirk, glowing red eyes. The way she hovered effortlessly, the more he looked, the more it added up. "So that makes you a real-life vampire?" he asked, voice somewhere between surprised and impressed. "With the whole floating, fangs, spooky charm package?" She grinned, sharp and unbothered. "That obvious? I mean, I've seen weirder. I once fought a guy made of living ink." He narrowed his eyes playfully. "Still, I figured you'd have a coffin or a cape or something. This whole tank top and jeans thing is kinda modern." "Coffins are overrated," she replied with a casual shrug, stretching her arms behind her head mid-float. Besides, I look better like this. Admit it. Oh, totally, Naruto said with zero hesitation. If everyone in this era looks like you and Bubblebutt, bubblegum, then maybe getting stuck in this weird candy world won't be so bad. That earned him a wide smirk. Bubblebutt, huh? You got a name to go with that mouth? Depends. You gonna use it for a song or a gravestone? She chuckled. Could go either way. He grinned. Naruto. Just Naruto? Would you believe me if I said Lord Naruto, the unrivaled, former hero of the Fourth Great Ninja War, keeper of beasts? And one-time nudist sage? She blinked, probably not. Yeah, most people didn't after a few thousand years. There was a pause as she twirled slowly in the air, arms folded behind her head like she was laying on clouds. Her gaze didn't leave him, curious now. Well, Naruto, she said, drawing his name out with a low lilt, what's a nudist sage doing wandering the darkest part of my forest? Naruto casually stretched, eyes scanning the tree line. Running, he said simply. She raised a brow, from what? Not from, he clarified. Just running, you know, excitement called, and I had to answer. She gave him the most skeptical smirk he'd seen in a while. That's the corniest thing I've ever heard. But you liked it. She floated down slightly and gave a lazy scratch under his chin with one sharp black nail. Unfortunately, yeah, I kinda did. Naruto's grin deepened, but his tone dropped just slightly, his gaze locking with hers. You shouldn't touch unless you're ready to open something you can't put back. That gave her half a beat of pause, enough to flash a little thrill across her face. Oh, most people I mess with run away crying or wetting themselves. Naruto leaned against the nearest tree, one hand in his pocket. Then they're missing out, you're fun. She chuckled, so are you. Naruto tilted his head again, playful but thoughtful. Alright, your turn, Vampire Queen's a fun title. But what do people actually call you? I gotta know what name to moan if you ever bite me. She laughed loud at that, then slowly floated down until her boots skimmed the forest floor. Marceline. Naruto tried the name out in his head. It suited her, elegant, dark, dangerous with a hint of art student. But he also questioned to himself, exactly why she had given the name so easily. He quickly remembered his first encounter, most likely not his last with Princess Bubblebutt. The main thing he was remembering was that name rule thing. It made he wondered why the vampire didn't follow it. He'd ask later, if it came up. And you really just hang out here? Naruto asked, glancing around. Creeping on runners in the woods? She grinned. Technically, this part of the forest is my home, my caves nearby, the trees and shadows keep the sun out. Naruto's eyes flicked toward the canopy. Smart, wouldn't want that pale skin burning up, it's one of your best features. She mock blushed and floated past him like she was going to flick his forehead, flatterer. I'm just saying what we're both thinking. You don't shut up, do you? Only if I'm unconscious, or maybe if I'm making out. She snorted, shaking her head, you're lucky you're cute. He gave her a short bow, I get that a lot. She hovered back up to eye level. So, what's your deal? You really just woke up one day and decided to go jogging through OOO? More like, I woke up under the dirt, his voice turned dry. Literally, buried, guess I overslept a few centuries. Marceline raised a brow, no kidding, how long were you down there? He rubbed his chin, not sure, long enough for the world to change. Maybe a little longer than I wanted, or maybe just the right amount, if I'm lucky enough to run into hot vampires on my first week. That earned him a pleased smirk. But yeah, he added, glancing around the trees again. I like mystery, adventure, but I'm not an idiot. Gotta gather intel before I dive headfirst into the weirdness. Marceline gave a mock sigh, then motioned him to follow with a lazy flick of her fingers. Alright. Mystery man, come on, walk with me, I'll drop some knowledge while we cruise. He stepped up beside her, hands still casually tucked in his pockets, eyes full of mischief. Lead the way, your royal batness. She rolled her eyes, but couldn't help the smile tugging at her lips. The forest floor was soft with moss and old roots, quiet except for the sound of leaves brushing above. Dappled light cut through the canopy in thin streaks. Naruto walked with his hands folded behind his head, each step loose and light, boots crunching the twigs beneath. Beside him, well, above him, floated the vampire girl, arms behind her head as if resting on an invisible hammock, gliding backward through the air. She hadn't given him a direction, just said walk with me, so he followed. So, she started, lazily spinning mid-air, what do you know about OOO, like, give me your, I'm a clueless guy in a weird land rundown. Naruto smirked, let's see, the only people I've seen so far were made of candy, but from what you said earlier humans are still around but I'm guessing candy and humans aren't the only ones around. There's multiple princesses, look where you step is obvious when everything seems ready to go off their rockers, I saw a weird-looking flying worm back in the grassy area. She snorted, okay, yeah, you already know a lot, definitely not stupid. About the people, yes you will meet so many races out here. Most of them now are just intelligent wildlife though, speaking dogs, walking foxes stuff like that. Marceline paused, think to herself, before flipping upside down in front of Naruto with a grin, you're right about the other stuff, and that worm thing, was actually a dragon. Naruto raised an eyebrow, dragons got weird, I guess that's what evolution does to you though. He looked up at her, watching her twist effortlessly through the air. She was just gliding like it cost her nothing. Her hair trailed behind her like a shadow with its own mind, slow and deliberate. You do this often, he asked, inviting strangers into your haunted woods? Only the cute ones, she grinned sideways. Naruto chuckled, shaking his head, well, I've been called worse. They walked in easy rhythm, her floating, him stepping around roots and kicking a pinecone. Naruto glanced toward her again, slower this time. She had that same sharp presence bubblegum had, commanding, dangerous, but wrapped in something freer. Less stiff, more wild. Pale skin like moonlight, fangs peeking out when she smiled, if all the women in this world were this hot, he figured he'd manage just fine. So, he started after a pause, what's with the name thing? She raised an eyebrow. You didn't hide yours, I was told, most people in this place don't give theirs out easy, especially not the royals. Marceline tilted sideways in the air, hovering over his shoulder now, upside down, you know about the name rule? Naruto nodded, casually. I catch on to things quick. She whistled, smart and sharp, I like that, yeah, name magic's a thing, especially among royals. The rule was emplaced by a group of princesses for that very reason yeah, but me, she spun upright and hovered ahead of him now. I'm not a princess, or a queen, not really, title's just a leftover thing. Leftover from what? She shrugged, her tone still light but less teasing, old days, vampire outbreaks, fights. I wasn't exactly like any of them, I killed most, not many left, or, none, actually. Naruto's smile didn't fade. But his eyes narrowed slightly. He could tell there were a few things missing in that story, but he wouldn't pry. So you're the last? Yup. They kept walking. And you, she asked. You said you just crawled out of the dirt, even though you say you're human it's hard to believe, you're not some kinda zombie, right? I'm human, he smiled, which somehow made that word feel strange. Mostly. Mostly, she echoed, amused. Long story, but yeah, I don't die, not anymore. Marceline turned that over in her head, then smirked. Well, aren't we just two freaks on a nature walk? I've been called worse. She laughed again, deeper this time, and did a slow roll in the air. So why didn't dying stick for you? He shrugged, could be multiple things, my mixed vitality thanks to mom and dad, or a few other punishments for things I did in my past. She gave him a look and shook her head, you are weird. I'm fun-sized weird. Debatable. They kept talking like that, slow and comfortable. She pointed out a few landmarks as they passed them, dead trees where ghosts were rumored to dance, rocks shaped like faces, a pond that turned your reflection into a monster if you stared too long. This place doesn't really have rules, she said, eventually. Just territories, power, old magic, new magic, don't mess with stuff unless you're ready for weird consequences. Naruto nodded, so basically. It's like the ninja world with extra steps. The what? Nothing, he grinned. Just means I've seen worse. That made her pause, then she asked, half curious, half casual, what exactly have you seen? Naruto thought about answering seriously, the wars, the monsters, friends dying. Whole villages burning, time catching up to him slower than everyone else. Instead, he just looked up at her and smirked. Enough to know your bat face wouldn't even make my top 10. Marceline grinned, letting out a sharp laugh. Alright, Blondie, I'll let you have that one. They walked on, Marceline floating slightly lower now, a little closer to his height. Neither of them asked where they were going. The path didn't matter, not yet. They were just walking, two immortals with matching smirks, slowly figuring out whether this weird new friendship was dangerous or just entertaining. Probably both. The forest eventually began to thin, the shadows that had clung tightly to their path slowly loosened their grip as the trees gave way to rock. Naruto's boots crunched over dry moss and scattered bones, actual bones, as he and Marceline emerged at the foot of a wide, stony cliff. At first glance, it looked like any other cave in All, craggy, gloomy, questionably safe. But this one had a small wooden house built just outside the entrance, crooked and half swallowed by the stone. Pink. Naruto squinted up at it, smirking, friendly. Marceline floated ahead of him, hands behind her head, boots swinging lazily as she hovered toward the mouth of the cave. They'd been walking for a while now, and she'd told him a lot, not everything, not the juicy bits, but enough to piece together a rough map of All in his head. The kingdoms, the way the land didn't quite follow logic anymore. Which creatures ruled where? Which names you didn't say out loud? What rules got you vaporized, and what rules only got you turned into a snail? Enough to make him feel like he wasn't walking in blind anymore. But he still wasn't prepared for what greeted him around this new world. I thought it was just gonna be a cave, he muttered, mostly to himself. Behind him, Marceline smirked, everyone does. They quickly went into the large pink house, one bedroom, one living room, and a kitchen. It was all she really needed, all Naruto expected, and he liked no one had to deal with rent anymore, that was a pain, before, and after he became immortal. He gave a low whistle, stepping around the kitchen table, stacked with sheet music and empty mugs. Gotta say, for a scary vampire queen, your feng shui is pretty chill. Marceline floated past him and flopped onto a beanbag near the back, arms draped lazily over the sides. I like comfort, sue me. Naruto wandered over to the edge of a low bookshelf. Eyeing the strange mix of cassette tapes, comics, and a human skull wearing shutter shades. This place feels like a teenage goth hoarder fused with a rock star. Correct on both counts, she said with a wink. Naruto snorted, figures. There was a beat of silence, not awkward, just, still, the first true pause since they'd met. Naruto let his hands rest on the back of a chair as he looked around again, slower this time. Thanks for showing me this place, and everything else. Marceline shrugged, didn't do it for you, I was bored. He grinned, harsh. Honest. Another quiet moment passed, and Naruto stepped toward the exit, gaze trailing back toward the forest outside. Well, I should probably keep moving. Marceline lifted a brow, you just got here. Yeah, but, this world's got a lot of corners. And I've only really been here, and that Candy Crush-looking wonderland. Still more woman to flirt with, places to see, people to kill, mess with, kick their ass, all of the above. She scoffed through a smirk, arms crossing behind her head again, you're a weirdo. You say that like it's a bad thing. Marceline watched him head for the mouth of the cave. He turned, stepping out into the light-dappled edge of the forest. Marceline drifted after him, stopping just short of the entrance. You're weird, you know that, she called after him. You mentioned, Naruto called back, waving without turning around. Try not to miss me too hard. She rolled her eyes, grinning despite herself. No promises. Naruto vanished into the trees, boots crunching gently against the leaves. Marceline stood there a while after he was gone, not waiting, not watching, just thinking. She floated backward into the cave, letting the shadows wrap around her again. Picked up her axe that doubled as a base, sat cross-legged on the floor. Her fingers hovered over the strings for a moment, then, strum. Something low, melodic, curious. She played until the sun dipped low and the forest grew quiet again. Naruto found himself walking out of the dark forest. Slipping soundlessly through the bushes and brushing past thick foliage. The cool air carried the scent of moss and damp bark, but his mind was elsewhere. He was still riding the high from talking with Marceline, not just because she'd been fun to mess with, but because it confirmed something important. There were still cool people in this strange future, people worth meeting, people worth remembering. But, as always, boredom was quick to creep in. OOO was a big place, and he'd barely scratched the surface. There were still too many mysteries to poke at, too many corners to cause trouble in. And, sure, he still had a few personal problems, like the fact he didn't have a place to crash, but he decided that could wait. Maybe he could whip up a home with a jutsu if it came to it, not like he really needed it anyway. The bigger problem, in the few hours he'd been awake in this new world, he hadn't found a single fight, not one actual opponent. He had pretty much only been chased by a banana mob. His fingers twitched in restless anticipation. He wanted confrontation, the thrill of facing someone who thought they had him beat, the chaos of turning the fight on its head. Maybe pull a prank mid-battle just to see the look on their face. Talking to Marceline had been fun, but he was itching for something more physical, something loud. Something he could feel in his bones. Near the edge of the forest. He stopped, leaning his shoulder against the dark, gnarled bark of a tree. When do I get to have a good fight, he muttered, lips pulling into a faint frown as his sharp, fox-red eyes flicked back toward the forest shadows. I should have asked her that, he said, pushing off the tree. Hell, that should have been the first thing I asked. But knowing this place, maybe I should just hope I stumble into someone's territory I'm not supposed to be in. The thought made him chuckle, a grin spreading back across his face. The idea of walking straight into trouble had always been a reliable way to pass the time. His gaze drifted past the tree line and toward the rolling grasslands beyond. In the distance, something unusual caught his eye, a massive treehouse, so big it dwarfed the rest of the landscape. Huh, he tilted his head, grin sharpening. Guess I did skip that weird tree earlier, might as well check it out. With that, Naruto shoved his hands into his pockets and started walking, already wondering if whoever lived there would be the friendly type, or the fight first, ask later type. Either way, he was fine with it. Naruto exited the forest a few moments later, the low sun casting an orange glow across the horizon. The light spilled over the massive treehouse ahead, and now that he was closer, he could see just how enormous it really was. The last time he'd passed by, he'd been running, only catching a glimpse. Now, he could take it in, every branch twisting outward like arms, and at the base, a mismatched wooden home fused into the trunk like it had been built there by stubborn hands. Bigger than I expected, roomy, too. He could almost smell the snacks from here. Oh, he hoped so. Even though he didn't need to eat anymore, he was still a glutton. Maybe that should be his welcome, emptying their pantry and waiting for the owners to walk in on a random, handsome blonde man lounging on their couch. Whatever they had in there better be edible. With that in mind, Naruto pressed his hand against the wooden door. The wood felt damp, weather-worn, and with one solid push, it blasted inward, flying off its hinges and crashing into a ladder with a loud clang before collapsing to the floor. He smirked at the sound and stepped inside, hands in his pockets. His eyes scanned the room, landing immediately on a massive pile of gold sitting out in the open. He raised an eyebrow. What kind of job does this guy have? He muttered under his breath. Before he could wander closer, the faint crunch of footsteps on grass caught his ear. He turned toward the sound instantly, his smirk never wavering. Two figures approached. The first was a boy, maybe 13, wearing a simple light blue shirt, darker blue pants, and black shoes. A green backpack dangled from one arm. Scuffed and worn. A strange white hat covered his head entirely except for his tan face. His skin bore small scratches, like the kind you get from brambles or battle, and his blue eyes had that hard, warrior's glint. Naruto noted the kid was more built than his age should allow, but his gaze quickly shifted to the other figure. A yellow dog, walking upright, its forelegs were shaped almost like human arms, and its short, rounded body made the proportions work in a strange, cartoonish way. Naruto's first thought was mutation, but something about it felt different. He shoved the thought aside as the two finally spotted him. Excitement faded from their faces, replaced by confusion. Then anger. Naruto loved that look, when people got riled up before he'd even done anything. The dog's gruff, human-like voice rang out first. "What are you doing going into our treehouse?" Naruto chuckled, not even trying to hide it. "Why are you laughing? This isn't a laughing matter," the dog barked, anger rising. "You'd know, wouldn't you?" Naruto said casually. "I get the sense you're the type who doesn't like fun unless you're the one having it." That made the dog gape for a moment before his face scrunched up in irritation. "If that's enough to rattle you," Naruto added with a sly grin, "I'd move along, at least until I'm done with all the snacks in your place." The dog's scowl deepened, and he shook his head sharply. "You listen here, we're not going anywhere, this is our treehouse." "Oh really, I hadn't noticed I was walking into someone else's home," Naruto said with mock surprise. The boy stepped forward, placing a hand on the dog's shoulder while keeping his eyes locked on Naruto. The smirk never left the blonde's face. He wanted to see how this kid's words would land. "Come on dude," the boy said in a higher-pitched voice that still carried strength, "just get out of our storage area, and then leave, so this doesn't have to get rough." Naruto's grin turned sharp. "Now what if you're the one who doesn't want this to get rough? I'd hate for you to get hurt." The boy narrowed his eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Naruto said, tone dripping with mock innocence, "that if things do get rough, you'll be the one with your own foot shoved up your ass." The boy's scowl deepened. It was almost too easy to get under his skin. The dog cut in, turning to the boy. "Let's just beat him up until he leaves Finn, this guy's almost as annoying as Magic Man." The boy, Finn, Naruto nodded. "Yeah, I'm done playing diplomat, let's nail this guy Jake." Finn pulled out a golden sword with a black handle, the blade chipped and battered. A weapon that had clearly seen more than its fair share of fights. But Naruto wasn't focused on the weapon. No, his attention was fixed entirely on the way both of them charged him at once. Excitement flared in his chest, finally. His grin widened, gaze sharpening into something almost predatory. "Looks like the gods are still listening to my prayers. Now all I need after this is a bowl of ramen, and the day's perfect." The kid came in first, faster than most, but still slower than what Naruto was used to. Didn't matter. If anything, it made this more fun. It meant he could play with these two before getting serious. He leapt over a slash from the boy's golden sword, body flipping forward in the air. For a split second, the world flipped with him, sky where the ground should be. The tree house spinning lazily upside down. His legs buckled midair, but instead of landing clean, he reached down and caught the blade in his hand. Without hesitation, Naruto twisted midair, his legs flaring outward before his feet slammed into the dirt. The sword was still in his grip, pulling the boy toward him. Too open, Naruto thought, almost disappointed. His other arm shot out, dragging the kid in close, then his fist buried itself into the boy's gut. The breath left him in a sharp wheeze. Naruto released the sword only to plant a palm square into the boy's head, sending him tumbling back into the grass a few feet away. He straightened up, only to catch movement from the side. Two bright yellow arms stretched farther than humanly possible, lancing toward him like ropes. Naruto blinked. "Damn," he muttered aloud, "so the dog could stretch, shape-shifting, maybe, could the kid do something like that too?" It didn't matter. If anything, this just made things more interesting. His grin sharpened, dropping into a low stance, his hands spread out like claws. He waited for the next move. Jake's limbs moved in and out of themselves, weaving into strange loops and gaps like living chains meant to trap him. Naruto moved before they could close. He dove through the first gap, backflipping through the second, widening the distance between himself and the dog's main body. Then, opportunity, he grabbed Jake's long hands where they'd planted into the ground for support and yanked them upward. A wide stance gave him the leverage to twist them into a spiral knot. Naruto chuckled, "Hope you're flexible." A burst of strength ripped through his arms as he swung the tangled limbs upward, launching Jake high, so high his yellow form briefly soared above the tree house, before slamming him back down. The ground shuddered with the impact, a cloud of dust rising where the dog hit. Naruto didn't have time to gloat, a blade sliced the air just above his head. The kid was back, stronger now, stance tighter. Sloppy still, but more serious, better. Naruto slipped left. Avoiding a downward slash, the red in his eyes glinting as he tracked the motion. Another slash came, upward this time, dodge, side slash, dodge again. It kept going, a storm of blows tearing up grass and dirt, all missing their mark. Naruto was barely moving more than a few inches each time, not a bead of sweat on him. This is getting old, he thought, smirk curling wider. Alright, my turn. The next right slash came in, and Naruto dropped low, hands digging into the dirt like claws. His body shifted, lower, wilder, red eyes brightened with a predatory glow, his grin stretching animalistic. Now he looked like a beast ready to pounce. Finn's attack slowed, the opening was there. And Naruto took it. He spun upward in a coiled leap, twisting high above the boy in a sharp spiral. Before Finn could react, a sideways spinning kick slammed into his shoulder, sending him stumbling. Naruto kicked off midair to the ground, landing in another low stance, then lunged forward like a predator. His right hook came in like a claw swipe, grazing just enough to hurt. He spun with the motion, sweeping Finn's legs out. Before the boy could even hit the dirt, Naruto kept spinning, his fist driving into the boy's side with a final, bone-jarring blow. Finn flew back toward the tree house, right where Jake was still recovering. Both were down, Naruto straightened up, smirk still in place. The faint burn of adrenaline making his blood feel electric. Naruto stood there in the settling dust, shoulders loose, breathing steady. His gaze flicked between the two as they groaned and pushed themselves up. The blonde's smirk deepened when he caught the state of their faces, dirt-streaked, bruises forming, lips pressed tight with that stubborn look of people who really thought they were still in the fight. "They've got heart," he admitted to himself, eyes narrowing just a fraction. Natural talent too, but none of the polish that comes with years of training. Every move they'd made so far had been telegraphed, all raw spirit and no discipline. Still, there was something almost refreshing about it, no strategy manuals. No rigid stances, just that instinct to keep swinging. He almost lost it right there, biting back a laugh when he remembered how dead serious they'd been from the start. Who the hell starts attacking someone just for breaking into their home? He could name a few people, back before the long sleep, but never at this level of intensity. Even then, not after the shinobi world had burned itself out. People usually just let the cops deal with that sort of thing. And these two, they were dead set on giving him a fight, even if they had no idea what they were really up against. It was funny, stupid funny. By the time they got their footing, Naruto's smirk was threatening to split into a grin. Finn was the first to speak, sword still in hand. "He's stronger than he looks." Jake cracked his knuckles, eyes narrowing. "Yeah, doesn't make him any less annoying though." Finn glanced at him, jaw set. "We're gonna have to do more than our usual thing, we need some skill, some finesse." Jake nodded, "Yeah." That was it for Naruto. The laugh broke free, sharp and sudden, his hand coming up to rest on his head as his shoulders shook. They both turned toward him, confusion cutting through their seriousness. "You do know," Naruto said, grinning outright now, "that you just had your whole little plan talk right in front of me, right? I mean, I'm literally standing here, kind of defeats the point, don't you think? Finn's face tightened. Jake's too, their eyes narrowing again. Just shut up, Finn shot back. But Naruto was already laughing harder, almost doubled over. No, really, I love it, keep going, this is the best plan I've ever heard. Jake muttered something under his breath about how irritating he was, and Finn's grip tightened on his sword before he charged in again. Naruto was still laughing when Finn came at him again, sword slicing toward his side. He casually reached out and caught the blade mid-swing, fingers pinching it as if it were no sharper than a butter knife. Hold up, he said through a grin, let me finish laughing, but he didn't get the chance, a yellow fist came flying in from the side. And Naruto had to release the sword to catch it mid-air, his hand snapping up just in time. Jake's punch stopped inches from his cheek, knuckles pressed into his palm. Oh, Naruto's eyes glimmered, grin widening. Looks like you're taking me more seriously now, if that was even possible. With a flick of his wrists, he shoved both of them back, the force sending them skidding in opposite directions. His gaze sharpened for a moment as he realized what they were doing, spacing him out, looking to attack together this time. Like I thought, he mused, watching their shoulders shift in unison, they work better as a pair. They came at him almost instantly, Finn from the right, blade flashing, and Jake from the left, his leg stretched to an impossible length, heel aimed straight for Naruto's ribs, the timing was good, the angles sharp. Naruto's grin twitched into something a little more dangerous. Definitely better than their first swings, maybe they were holding back before, or maybe they just click better together. Steel and rubbery muscle closed in from both sides, and a glint flickered in Naruto's eyes. In a blur, he ducked under both strikes, the blade swiping harmlessly over his hair and Jake's kick slicing through empty air. Naruto's foot shot out, slamming into Jake's side and sending him spinning away, while he seemed to vanish entirely. Only to drop out of the sky and land crouched on Finn's back like a bored cat. Sloppy footwork, he teased, voice low in the boy's ear. You're wide open. Finn snarled and bucked hard, shoving him off before swinging again in rapid succession. Steel sliced through the air in a frantic rhythm, horizontal slash, diagonal, spin, thrust. He mixed it up this time, feinting low before cutting high, stepping in close with a jab, then twisting for a downward strike. Naruto dodged everything with infuriating ease, leaning, sidestepping, ducking, sometimes not even moving his feet, just tilting his head so the blade passed within inches. And all the while, he was talking. Is this the big finesse I heard about earlier? Cute. Almost got me there, nah, not really. Wow, you've got the look of a hero down. Shame about the aim. At one point, Finn managed to stab him clean through the gut, or at least it looked like it. Naruto's eyes went wide, and he clutched the wound with both hands, staggering backward. Oh no, he gasped dramatically, falling to one knee. Tell Marceline, I never got to give her back shots. Finn's face went pale for a second, then Naruto's grin split wide, and with a quick kick, he sent the boy tumbling just like before. That was when the shadow fell over him. He looked up, spotting a massive, stretched out fist descending from high above, Jake's legs pulled taut like ropes to keep him aloft. Now that's new, Naruto muttered, raising a foot without even thinking. The giant fist slammed into his soul, the impact shaking the ground and pushing him down slightly. His teeth clenched, not from pain, but from the effort of holding himself in place while a spark of exhilaration lit up behind his eyes. Stronger than I thought, he realized, a rush of excitement rippling through him, let's see more. He pushed back suddenly, sending the fist upward, and in the same motion vaulted into the air, reappearing behind Jake in a blur. Hands flashed through quick signs, and dark, bark-like material spread across his palm, twisting into a rough, grayish wood texture. With a sharp slap to Jake's side. The impact boomed, sending the shapeshifter hurtling downward like a thrown boulder, crashing into the ground beside Finn in a spray of dirt. Naruto landed lightly, shaking his hand once before flexing it, okay, now I'm warmed up. Naruto landed lightly, boots kicking up dust as Finn and Jake pushed themselves up from the ground. The boy wiped blood from his lip with the back of his glove, Jake shook his head like he could rattle off the days. Naruto tilted his head, still smirking. They weren't going to get much time to breathe. A quick weave of hand signs, chakra flowing to his palms, and he slapped both hands to the ground. The earth rumbled under his fingers. A jagged grayish wood erupted in twisting spirals, roots stretching skyward and hardening into thick, writhing tendrils. They cracked through the dirt in a rush, several lashing straight for the two of them like hungry serpents. Naruto stayed crouched, grinning at the way both froze for a split second in surprise. Jake's eyes went wide before his body ballooned upward, torso expanding until his fists swelled to the size of tree trunks. With a grunt, he swung one massive fist like a wrecking ball into the nearest tendril, the crack of wood snapping echoing like bones breaking. Another tendril came from the side and Jake spun his other fist into it, splinters spraying in the air. Meanwhile, Finn had already charged headlong into the mess, sword flashing. His blade carved into the wood with quick, frantic strikes, chunks flying past his face as the tendrils groaned and recoiled. Every slash sounded like tearing bark and snapping timber. The boy wasn't precise, far from it, but his swings had a raw stubbornness Naruto couldn't help but find entertaining. When the last splintered length of gray wood crumbled to the dirt, Naruto leaned back on his heels, watching them hunch forward, chests heaving, faces damp with sweat. They were stubborn, too stubborn to drop, but he could see in their shoulders that their strength was thinning out. He decided to call it. The grin stayed fixed on his face as he thought, shame I couldn't get the dog mad enough. Every time I tried, the kid was right at my heels, guess Jake just takes longer to recover. The fight hadn't been dangerous, not really, Naruto had made sure of that. His hits stung, sure, but he'd only just met these two. No point breaking the toys before figuring out all the ways they bend. Dropping to the dirt cross-legged, he smirked and let out a laugh, loud enough to pull their attention. Naruto sat cross-legged on the grass, smirk still plastered on his face, and let out a loud, unrestrained laugh. The kind that wasn't just amusement, it was a little too self-satisfied. That, he said, pointing lazily at them, was great. You two lasted way longer than I thought you would, good for a laugh too. Finn, still bent over with his hands on his knees, shot him a glare. What's that supposed to mean? You break into our home, start a fight, and then act like it's all a joke? Naruto's grin only widened, because it is a joke, at least to me. Jake stepped forward, still rubbing his shoulder. Well, we're not laughing, you could have seriously messed us up. Naruto tilted his head, unconcerned. Please, if I wanted to hurt you for real, you'd know it. Finn straightened, his glare not softening. Yeah, well maybe next time we won't go so easy on you. Naruto chuckled. Low and amused. Easy on me, is that what you call swinging that sword like your life depended on it? It did, Finn snapped, voice rising. You attacked us for no reason. Naruto raised a brow, no reason, you two didn't even ask questions before throwing yourselves at me. Plus you attacked first, who starts a fight when someone's just standing there? Finn opened his mouth, paused, then frowned, you were in our house. Naruto gave a small shrug, eyes glinting. Fair enough, but still, you're not half bad. Got some heart, both of you, natural talent, too, just, none of the skill that comes with real training. That jab made Finn bristle, but Jake actually looked mildly offended. We do fine without your training, thanks. Naruto just smirked, wasn't offering, but if you say so. Finn took a step forward, tone still sharp but less furious now. Alright fine, you're strong, but you still went way too far. You pulled that fake dying thing just to mess with us, that's messed up. Yeah, Jake added, you were clearly enjoying yourself way too much. Naruto leaned back on his hands, completely at ease. Many people tell me that, doesn't mean I'm gonna stop. That earned him a long sigh from Jake and an incredulous laugh from Finn. Finn crossed his arms, his tone shifting toward something more competitive than hostile. You know, I think if we had another shot, I'd get more hits in, you wouldn't be smiling so much then. Naruto's eyes lit up. Oh, you're already thinking about round 2? Yeah, Finn said, a grin starting to push through his frown. And this time, we'd bring more than just what we usually do. Jake muttered, yeah, that'll totally make him less annoying. Naruto laughed out loud, actually leaning forward, his grin widened. Still, you two made it fun, you lasted longer than most, and I didn't even have to go all out. That's rare. Jake folded his arms again. Is that supposed to be another compliment? It is, Naruto said simply. Look, I'm stopping here because if we kept going, I don't know if I could stop myself from killing you. And that'd be a waste. Finn tilted his head, a waste? Naruto nodded, people worth messing with don't come around often. That made Finn laugh, shaking his head. You're really weird, man, but, I guess I get it. Jake grumbled, I don't. Finn ignored him. Alright, fine, you can come inside, we can talk, maybe you can teach me some of those moves. Naruto stood, dusting himself off, that same fox-like grin on his face. Sure, why not? Jake sighed, muttering as they headed toward the treehouse, yeah, what could possibly go wrong? Naruto leaned back casually against the rough bark of the giant treehouse, eyes flicking between Finn's eager, youthful face and Jake's wary stance just behind him. The sun dipped low, casting golden light through the branches, wrapping everything in warmth. Finn's voice bubbled with excitement as he recounted their adventures, treasure hunts, monster battles, wild chases through the strange lands of Oo. His grin was wide, eyes bright, carrying the reckless spirit of youth Naruto knew well. Jake stood close, arms crossed, eyes sharp with suspicion, like a guardian ready for trouble but holding back. Naruto smirked, sensing the silent question in Jake's gaze, who is this guy really? He liked that challenge. Finn's story sounded childish at times, like two brothers who goofed off as much as they fought evil, but beneath it all was a genuine heart. Something Naruto respected. It reminded him of the simpler days of his own past, before weight and loss pressed down on him. When it was Naruto's turn, he shrugged off the full weight of his story. He gave them the basics: a ninja who carries a powerful beast inside, fights for those he cares about, a past marked by battles and scars. He answered some of their questions, leaving others hanging, because some things were still tangled in mystery. As he talked, a thought flickered through Naruto's mind: maybe he should stop giving away so much of himself. Not everyone needed to know the whole story. But then again, maybe only the people worth knowing deserved the truth, cool people. People like Finn and, maybe someday, Jake. The night deepened, and Naruto's tone shifted as he continued to share something more personal, a story from his past, his first real fight with Sasuke. And then he shoved a mass of lightning through my chest, practically ripping a hole straight through my rib cage. Naruto's tone was matter-of-fact, almost casual, but the faint curl of his lip hinted at the sting still buried in the memory. It hurt like hell, he continued, leaning back slightly. Felt like every cell in my body got struck by lightning, even though it was just my chest that got hit. Finn's eyes widened, the boy leaning forward with an expression halfway between awe and disbelief. Naruto's grin only widened in response, like a storyteller enjoying his captive audience. What happened next? Finn asked, his voice brimming with curiosity. Naruto let the question hang in the air for a beat, his gaze drifting off like he was watching a scene replay in front of him. For him, moments like this weren't just memories, they were as vivid as if they'd happened yesterday. He could still smell the rain, taste the dust in the air, hear the roar of the waterfall. After a few more blows, he began slowly, we both decided to push beyond anything we'd done before. He went all in with his weird curse mark thing, and I called on Kurama's chakra cloak. The words carried a faint edge of nostalgia. But also weight. He hit me again, this time with some twisted black chidori, and all I managed in return was a scratch across his forehead protector. Naruto's eyes narrowed faintly, his tone flattening. Even after all that, I wish I'd finished it then. Would have stopped him from doing all the crap he pulled later. Leaving the village, stirring up trouble everywhere, and then, he trailed off, jaw tightening. After he became Hokage. The last word came out quieter, like it left a bitter taste in his mouth. For a moment, he just stared past Finn, the silence thick with things left unsaid. Then, as if catching himself, Naruto forced out a hearty laugh and clapped a hand on Finn's shoulder. "But that's all in the past now," he said, shaking his head like he was brushing away dust. "No point in dwelling on old fights, besides," his grin turned mischievous, "you're starting to look like you're picturing it and thinking you could have done better." Finn smirked faintly, but before he could reply, Jake's voice cut in from the side, his tone carrying that same suspicion he'd had since Naruto showed up. Finn let out a low whistle. "Man, I've never been in a fight like that. Closest I've come is, I dunno, chasing down some big monster or fighting tree witches. But nothing that sounds like death-level stuff." Naruto tilted his head with a small grin. "So you mostly fight small fry, huh?" Finn bristled. "Hey, not small fry, just, not lightning through the chest fry." Naruto chuckled. "Fair enough." Finn's expression softened. "But, you didn't hate him after that, even after all that stuff he did?" Naruto shook his head. "Nah, if I gave up on him, no one else would have even tried to bring him back. Doesn't mean I wasn't pissed, but hate makes it too easy to quit." Finn smiled faintly. "I think I get that. I'd probably stick with Jake too, no matter what." Naruto smirked. "Good answer, kid." Before Finn could reply, Jake's voice cut in, low, edged. Hate to break up story time, but you guys seeing that?" They turned to where he pointed, over the treetops. White plumes twisted skyward, glinting faintly in the sunlight. Naruto frowned. "Doesn't look like smoke." "It's not," Jake said flatly. "That's cold air. Ice King's kind of cold, and unless Princess Bubblegum's throwing a snow cone party, we've got trouble." Naruto's brows rose. "Ice King, so, he's king of what, snow?" Finn answered quickly. "Pretty much, he's like a creepy wizard guy with ice powers, likes to kidnap princesses." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Kidnap M for what?" "Mostly to bug M," Jake said. "Sometimes keeps them locked in his ice castle, always a pain in the butt." Naruto's tone hardened. "Does he hurt M?" Finn shifted. "Not, usually, but he's still dangerous. But I don't think he is really much of a threat, most the time that is." Naruto leaned back slightly, grin forming. "Sounds like a perfect warm-up." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Don't get cocky, Whiskers, he's got magic. The real kind. 1 second you're fine, the next, you're an ice cube." "I've handled worse," Naruto said with a shrug. But in the back of his mind, he pictured the icy landscape he'd looked over hours ago. Made sense that it was most likely Ice King's home, and if Princess Bubblebutt's kingdom was in that direction, no way he was sitting this out. He just had to mess with her some more. She was in fact the first person to help him, even if she didn't know it. The blonde chuckled at the thought. Jake stepped forward. "Slow your roll, Finn, we just met him. I don't think the princess would like us sending some random crazy man to go stop another crazy man, especially with your fellow blondes, striking personality, that and he might get himself killed." Finn bristled. "Jake, if he beat us, I'm pretty sure he could handle Ice King." "That's not the point," Jake shot back. "The point is, we don't know him, not enough to trust him with the princess." Naruto crossed his arms. "Trust or not, I'm going." Finn stepped closer, chin up. "Then I'm going with you." Naruto smirked. "Fine, but we're not walking." In one smooth motion, he swung Finn onto his back before the boy could react. "Whoa, hey," Finn yelped, grabbing Naruto's shoulder. Naruto glanced at Jake, grin widening. "Keep the tea warm, stretchy, we'll be back, hopefully with ramen." Before Jake could argue, Naruto crouched on the windowsill. The cool wind hit his face, sharp, electric, and his blood thrummed with anticipation. "Later," he said, and leapt. They dropped 3 stories, hit the ground running, and tore off toward the icy plumes, the Candy Kingdom's fate now resting on his speed. The muffled thump-thump of hurried candy guards echoed through the marble halls, but Princess Bubblegum didn't look up from the formula she was jotting down. Ice King's raids were disruptive, sure, but hardly catastrophic. If anything, they were more of a recurring nuisance. Like a dentist appointment, a very loud, very frosty dentist appointment. And today, apparently, it had been moved up without warning. She frowned, tapping her pen against the clipboard. 3 days early, he's usually more predictable than this. Did something throw off his routine? Her mind flicked to the other interruption this day, the blonde stranger, Naruto. She hadn't expected him to escape, at all. 1 minute, he'd been leaning against the cell wall like he had all the time in the world, the next, there was a hole in her prison wing and a trail of debris leading outside. He hadn't even needed help, that alone set him apart from the usual troublemakers that drifted into the Candy Kingdom. Now, she wasn't sure what to make of him. She'd marked him as an unknown, unpredictable and potentially dangerous, but the feeling was layered with the same irritation he'd sparked the moment they met. The way he'd grinned at her like they were already friends. The shameless flirting, the casual way he'd dodged every one of her questions. And yet, she found herself wondering where he'd gone, what he was doing, and, more annoyingly, if he'd actually had some kind of plan when he left. She'd expected him to run into trouble out there, maybe even crawl back asking for help. Instead, nothing. Another boom rattled the throne room doors, sending a faint puff of snow through the gaps. The guards at her side tensed, spears lifting in unison. PB adjusted her crown and set her clipboard aside with practiced patience. Well, whatever the reason, it's nothing we haven't dealt with before. The throne room doors groaned once before blasting open in a burst of icy wind, frost scattering across the polished candy tile floor. Guards scrambled into defensive positions, spears trembling in their sugared hands. Ice King swept in like a half-melted blizzard, arms thrown wide, his beard glittering with icicles. His skin was the color of frostbite, stretched thin under a tangle of a dark blue cloak and the large flapping white beard, that billowed as if it, and not his body, carried him aloft. A golden crown rested precariously on his head, 3 ruby-red gems glowing faintly as if they alone kept the old fool airborne. It did nothing to hide the bald dome beneath, only framed it. And through it all, his mouth stretched into a jagged, shark-like grin, equal parts cartoonish and unsettling. "Ah, Princess Bubblegum, your frosty suitor has arrived," he twirled once, robe flapping dramatically, then pointed his gnarled finger at her throne. "And today's the day you finally accept my proposal." The candy guards muttered nervously, but Princess Bubblegum stayed seated, her face composed. With a small sigh, she folded her hands neatly in her lap. "Ice King," she said evenly, "we've been through this before, countless times in fact. I'm not interested in being kidnapped, and I certainly don't intend to marry you." He stomped a snowy boot, spraying slush across the floor. "Oh, come on, what's wrong with me? I've got a castle, penguins, cool powers, you'd be the queen of ice, princess of cold, first lady of frosty love." He clutched his chest as though making the case to himself more than to her. Princess Bubblegum resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Instead, she leaned forward slightly. "You don't need a queen, Ice King, you need to leave my kingdom, you've already hurt many of my people." His bluster faltered for a heartbeat. "But only briefly. They were in my way, keeping me from what I deserve," he said bitterly. The candy guards shifted uneasily, spears rising higher. PB lifted a hand, signaling them to hold. She always tried this way first. Not because she believed Ice King would ever listen, but because once, a long time ago, someone dear to her had thought he was worth the effort. Marceline always insisted he wasn't just a villain. PB pushed that thought away quickly, keeping her focus forward. "Ice King," she said, her tone firm but not unkind, "this isn't the way to get what you want, kidnapping me, threatening my people, it won't work, it never works. Why do you keep repeating this?" He flapped his arms, crown askew, voice breaking between anger and desperation. "Because you're perfect, and if you'd just give me a chance, you'd see it too. I can't just stop, okay, this is what I do." His frost crept farther into the room, dusting the guard's candy armor. Princess Bubblegum's lips pressed into a thin line, part of her wanted to snap, to order her guards to drive him out immediately. But another part, the part she didn't like to acknowledge, hesitated. The part that remembered Marceline's voice, softer and sadder than usual, saying that he wasn't always like this. She inhaled slowly. Ice King, you're making this harder on yourself. Please, just turn around and go home. But the look in his eyes made clear he wouldn't. Ice King's face scrunched into a scowl, his voice rising in a shrill echo that bounced across the candy-tiled walls. If you won't marry me, he spread his arms wide, a flurry of jagged frost bursting from his fingertips, then I'll capture you in an iceberg forever, then you can't run away, and I can gaze at your beauty for all eternity. A collective gasp rippled through the candy guards as sheets of ice cracked across the throne room floor, creeping closer with each waking second. That was when her guards acted, lounging into battle, a fight they wouldn't soon win. Princess Bubblegum let out a quiet sigh through her nose. Her expression unchanged even as the temperature dropped. Of course, straight from awkward proposals to melodramatic imprisonment, same as every week. She shifted slightly on her throne, letting the weight of her crown settle against her head. Internally, she was already making calculations, how long the guards could hold him off, what countermeasures she could activate if necessary, but she didn't let that show. Instead, she smoothed her dress and sat straighter, the very picture of a composed monarch. Finn's probably already seen the frost from afar, she thought. He'll come charging in soon enough, I just need to play my part. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, polite. Demure, the mask of the helpless princess she'd perfected long ago. It gave her time to think, to let her mind drift back to unfinished formulas and experiments instead of the cold buffoon shouting in her hall. The battle ended quickly, spears put down with the banana guards who groaned in pain as Ice King floated above them all. But then, something shifted. It wasn't the usual bite of Ice King's magic, nor the creeping chill of frost seeping through the walls. It was sharper, a ripple in the air, sudden and unfamiliar, as though the room itself braced for impact. Princess Bubblegum straightened, pink eyes flicking up instinctively. A breath of silence, like the moment before glass shatters, and then the ceiling did shatter. Stone and candy plaster rained down as a blur of orange and gold crashed through from above. Ice King yelped in shock, only to be flattened under the impact as Naruto landed squarely on his back, dust and frost exploding outward in a chaotic spray. When the haze settled, the would-be kidnapper lay groaning beneath a pair of sandaled feet, and atop him stood the grinning figure Princess Bubblegum had not expected to see again so soon. Naruto brushed dust from his shoulder, eyes glinting with mischief as they locked on hers. "Yo princess, miss me?" For a few seconds, though it felt like hours, Princess Bubblegum didn't react. Not outwardly, at least. Inwardly, her mind was already racing. The sight of him struck her with equal parts irritation and disbelief. He was supposed to be gone, vanished to who knows where after blasting a hole through her dungeon wall. And now here he was, crashing straight back into her palace without so much as a word of explanation. She straightened in her throne, though her thoughts were anything but composed. Why here, why now, to gloat, to tease her again? Bonnible Bubblegum had only spoken with the man once, minutes that dragged like hours, yet he had left her unsettled in ways few others could. She knew almost nothing about him, and from what little she had gathered, boredom alone could have been enough to explain his return. And with him, that was almost the problem, his unpredictability. Her thoughts halted when another figure clambered off Naruto's back. The familiar form of Finn landed beside him, wide-eyed and smiling, and suddenly more questions filled her mind. Did they already know each other? What had Naruto been doing since his escape? And why did Finn look so utterly at ease with him? She wouldn't have cared so much with anyone else. But Naruto was unpredictable and annoyingly difficult to categorize. "Whoa," Finn's voice rang out, full of awe. He landed with all the eagerness of a kid tumbling into the middle of a storybook battle. "That was, like, super epic, you totally flattened him." "I know," Naruto chuckled, tossing a glance Finn's way. "Kinda expected more of a fight." The Ice King groaned at that but didn't so much as shove Naruto off. Bubblegum's eyes widened despite herself. Even Finn and Jake had trouble subduing the Ice King, and yet Naruto dismissed him like swatting away a gnat. More striking still, Finn didn't look surprised at all. They had definitely spoken before. "Yo princess," Naruto called over, grin tugging at his lips. "You gonna say something, or do I gotta tease you again to get your attention?" Her mind caught on that single word, again, and for once, Bubblegum wasn't sure how she should respond. Finn, however, raised an eyebrow immediately. "Wait, hold up, you already know Princess Bubblegum?" "Yup," Naruto's reply was quick, casual, almost breezy, like he had said it 1,000 times before. He leaned back slightly, still perched atop Ice King as though the blue menace was nothing more than an inconvenient prop. "Met her around the same hour I woke up here. She tossed me in a dungeon, but, wasn't too hard to get out." His smirk widened, eyes glinting toward Bubblegum, clearly hoping to provoke a reaction. "And he got one." "I would have let you out eventually," Bubblegum said, voice clipped with careful control. "You earned your stay after the way you twisted every answer I asked." Naruto chuckled, entirely unfazed. "Technically, I gave you answers, you just didn't like how I said them." He gave a small shrug. "Besides, I've got nothing to hide. Honestly, if I'd stayed in that cell of yours any longer, I'd probably have died of boredom, or worse, never met this guy." He gave Finn a nod, playful and conspiratorial. Finn's grin widened, puffing out his chest. "Yeah, guess you're lucky, huh?" Bubblegum's lips twitched, though whether it was annoyance or faint amusement even she wasn't sure. This man, he was infuriating, exasperating, and far too unpredictable. Yet part of her couldn't deny he moved with the kind of confidence and skill that was intriguing. And the speed with which he'd escaped, then returned, only added to the mystery. Naruto's head tilted toward her, expression teasing, sly. "What's wrong, princess, you miss me already?" Her breath caught, then she forced a measured sigh, unbelievable. "I assure you, I have far better ways to occupy my time." Naruto's grin widened at the flicker of reaction in her eyes. "Huh, that's what you said last time too, guess some things don't change." Finn, still wide-eyed, glanced from Bubblegum to Naruto. "So, wait, you actually talked, and you were in her dungeon." He looked incredulous, but also fascinated, like a kid piecing together a new puzzle. "It was necessary," Bubblegum said smoothly, trying to assert control. "He was an unknown variable, and he still is." Naruto leaned slightly forward, elbows resting on his knees, eyes glinting. "Unknown, huh, sounds like a challenge," his grin sharpened. "But sometimes I like to see just how unpredictable things can get." PB's brow furrowed, a flush rising to her cheeks despite herself. Excuse me," she said, adjusting her posture as if to physically put some distance between them. "Unpredictable how?" Naruto tilted his head, voice low and teasing. "Oh, pushing buttons, seeing reactions. Maybe getting someone to chase me around a palace, or make that frustrated face you're making right now." He smirked, clearly enjoying the effect. PB's lips pressed into a thin line, hands curling slightly as she tried to maintain composure. Internally, she scolded herself. Why did he have to be so infuriatingly bold, and why did a part of her actually notice how quick-witted he was? Finn, watching from the side, tilted his head in confusion. He'd been told about their first meeting, but this back and forth made him unsure what to make of it. Maybe just ignore him for now," he offered, hoping to calm the rising tension. Naruto's grin didn't waver. "Ignore me, where's the fun in that?" He leaned back slightly, gaze flicking to PB. "Come on, Princess Bubblebutt, you've got to admit, life's a bit dull if you can't handle a little chaos." PB exhaled sharply through her nose, crossing her arms. "I am fully capable of handling chaos, just not this level of nonsense." Finn, trying to mediate, waved a hand between them. "Yeah, sure, he's a bit intense, but he did land on the Ice King to save you, even if he was bored or something." PB's eyes flicked to Finn, a mix of surprise and internal conflict crossing her features. 1. She hadn't expected Finn to already side with this unpredictable stranger. 2. Why was she letting Naruto's words, and that grin, get under her skin at all? Her thoughts barely had time to process when a chilling gust cut through the room, and the Ice King's voice boomed, sharp and demanding. "Enough, stop acting like I'm not here, Princess Bubblegum, you will come with me." Naruto's grin widened, tilting his head as he studied the blue-skinned man. "Looks like our friend here doesn't like being ignored," he murmured, almost to himself, before preparing to move. "That's right, weird new human," Ice King snarled, wobbling into the air near the gaping hole Naruto had left in the ceiling. His beard flapped as he puffed out his chest. "I was only caught off guard because you fell on me. I was taking a power nap." PB didn't believe that for a second, not with the pathetic groans he'd made while pinned. "But now that I'm up," Ice King shouted, crown sparking, "you won't surprise me a second time, not even if you fall out of the sky again." The words were punctuated by a crackling blast of blue energy. It fizzed like lightning, thunder in its sound, freezing the very air it ripped through. Naruto barely moved, just a sidestep, hands tucked behind his back, casual as ever. The bolt slammed into the floor where he'd stood, leaving a bizarre scar scorched and frozen at once, hairline crack spidering outward. PB's breath hitched at the speed of it, but she didn't have time to process. Another jagged strike arced toward her throne. She started to rise, but before she could move, strong arms scooped her up. The world blurred, and in the next instant she was off her throne, held securely against Naruto's chest. Behind them, the royal seat shattered into glittering shards of ice. Naruto landed lightly on the far side of the ruined hall, dust curling around his sandals. He still held Bubblegum in a bridal carry, his grin infuriatingly unbothered. "Phew," he said with mock relief, tilting his head down toward her. "That was close, would have been a shame if you'd gotten all frosted up." Her heart was pounding, not that she'd ever admit it. No one touched her like this, let alone carried her around like some damsel. She wanted to snap at him, to wriggle free and demand he put her down, but her tongue felt caught somewhere between indignation and disbelief. Naruto tilted her a little closer, golden hair brushing her cheek as he added. "Low enough that only she could hear, though, gotta say, having you this close makes it easier to admire the view." Her face flushed hot, the sharp retort dying in her throat. Of course he'd go for the most inappropriate, infuriating comment possible at a time like this. Bonnibel's lips pressed into a tight line, she couldn't give him the satisfaction of reacting, except she didn't have the chance. A bolt of ice lightning tore across the room, sizzling through the air where they'd just been. Naruto blurred away in an instant, the motion so fast her stomach dipped like she was falling. The strike hit the marble floor, leaving it scorched black and frozen white at the same time. Cracks racing outward in jagged patterns. Another blast came, and another. Each one was faster, louder, bursting through the air like living thunder. But every time, Naruto was faster, vanishing, reappearing, carrying her as if she weighed nothing, his movements a blur that her eyes could barely track. PB's thoughts struggled to keep up, his speed was beyond anything she'd measured in OO before, faster than Finn, faster than even some of her machines. And he wasn't even breaking a sweat. "Hold still," Ice King screeched from above, his crown sparking wildly as he hurled blast after blast. His beard snapped in the air as he flailed in frustration. "Stop dodging, that's cheating." Each failure only drove him into more of a tantrum, the air thick with frost and the acrid sting of ozone. On the ground, Finn had his hands balled into fists, eyes wide as he tried to follow Naruto's movements. "Whoa," he whispered, almost forgetting to breathe. He'd fought Ice King dozens of times, but never had he seen anyone toy with him like this. Finally, after one last, desperate volley, Ice King hovered panting in midair, sweat mingling with the frost in his beard. His shoulders sagged, breath wheezing. Naruto stopped moving, landing lightly beside Finn. He brushed his long, spiky hair out of his face with one hand, still cradling PB with the other like it was effortless. "You know," he said, casually, "I really should cut this mess, gets in my way too much." Finn's head whipped toward him, shaking quickly. "No way, dude, long hair is, like, the raddest hair, you gotta keep it." Naruto raised a brow, pretending to consider it, then smirked. Guess it does have its perks. Still, too easy to grab in a fight. His gaze slid deliberately toward PB, lips quirking. The hidden meaning hit her instantly, her blush deepened despite her efforts, and she hated how quickly he'd cornered her with a single glance. Finn, of course, remained oblivious, just nodding along. Naruto laughed at her expression, a low, genuine sound, before finally setting her down on her feet beside Finn. "All right, kid," he said with a stretch of his shoulders, eyes glinting at the still wheezing Ice King. "Handle the princess for me, I'm gonna have a little fun." PB blinked at him, still catching her breath from being hauled around like a sack of sugar. "Wait, Finn, you're just going to let him?" Finn shrugged, glancing between the two. "I mean, yeah, I still don't really know if he's good or evil or whatever, met him like, an hour ago." He grinned anyway, a bit sheepish, "but I can tell he's strong enough to handle Ice King, no problem." Bonnibel's brow furrowed, that trust, it unnerved her. Finn had saved her countless times, proven himself a true hero. But this stranger. This unpredictable, sharp-smiling man who needled her at every turn? Could she really just trust him because Finn did? She didn't know, not yet, but maybe watching him fight, seeing how he carried himself against Ice King when the pressure was real, maybe then she'd have her answer. So she stayed silent, eyes fixed on Naruto as he rolled his shoulders, golden hair catching the cold light. The Ice King, though winded, wasn't giving up. With a frustrated screech, he raised both hands and unleashed another jagged volley of ice lightning. The blasts tore through the throne room like furious storms, freezing air and stone in their wake. Naruto didn't even flinch. He weaved through the attacks with infuriating ease, slipping just past each crackling bolt like it was part of a game. He leaned back on one foot, balanced on one hand, then spun lazily out of the way of another, striking poses that looked more like dance moves than combat. "You call that aiming?" Naruto laughed, twisting in midair to land on a single fingerdip before flipping back upright. "Come on, old man, I've seen snowballs with better accuracy." PB couldn't believe what she was seeing. He wasn't just dodging, he was mocking Ice King, moving with an almost exaggerated casualness, twisting into poses so ridiculous she was certain he was doing it purely to irritate him. It worked. "Stop mocking me," Ice King wailed, face red beneath his beard as sparks flew from his crown. "You're supposed to be frozen and begging for mercy, not doing yoga poses on my attacks." Naruto dropped into a squat mid-dodge, resting his chin in his hand with a mock-thoughtful expression. "You jealous? Bet you couldn't pull this one off." Then he glanced over his shoulder at Finn and PB, flashing them both a wink. Finn hooped, "That's so math." PB, however, felt her jaw tighten. He was too reckless, too focused on showing off. And in that instant, she saw it, the one moment his grin got ahead of his awareness. "Look out," she shouted at the same time as Finn. But the warning was too late. Ice King, seizing the opportunity, hurled a concentrated blast straight at Naruto's exposed back. The crackling spear of ice lightning was going to hit, and then something else happened. A surge of black energy burst from Naruto, swirling into a shroud that rippled and hissed like living fire. It swallowed the attack whole, ice and frost dissolving against its unnatural heat. The impact shook the room, stone splintering under the pressure, but the shroud didn't budge. PB's breath caught, Finn's eyes went wide, even Ice King faltered in midair, blinking. Naruto, however, looked almost amused. He glanced down at the black chakra swirling around him, lips curving into a knowing smile. "I was wondering when you'd wake up," he said quietly, as though addressing it. "You sleep more often than Kurama, you know that?" The shroud shifted, coiling around him, and though no sound reached PB's ears, it was clear to her that something had spoken back, something only he could hear. Naruto's smile widened, and he tilted his head as if listening. Then he looked over his shoulder at Ice King, utterly unfazed. "He's not that much of a threat, but, yeah, you're probably right, ending it now would be better for him." PB felt a chill, not from the frost, but from the tone. For the first time, she wondered just how dangerous this man truly was. Naruto sighed, running a hand through his spiky hair. Shame though, day's barely half over, and if I finish this too quick, no more fun. The shroud pulsed again. He chuckled. Okay, okay. You win, but, his gaze flicked to PB, and his voice shifted. Messing with her like that, that's going too far, I might joke, but that's not a kind of fun I'd ever take lightly, not with someone I just met. Her lips parted slightly, he'd said it so simply, almost offhand, but there was a strange weight to it, a line he wouldn't cross, no matter how much he teased. He paused, listening again. Then that grin returned, sharp, predatory. That's a good idea. He lowered himself to the ground, sitting cross-legged as if preparing for a conversation rather than a fight. The black shroud coiled around him like a cloak, flickering at the edges with a dangerous heat. Ice King, he called, voice steady. Something's been brought to my attention. The wizard faltered, confusion evident even through his beard. Huh? Naruto smirked, seeing as you can't land a blow on me for real, I'll make it simple, I'm giving you a choice in how you go out. He raised one finger, casual. The easy way, a second finger, the hard way, then a third, or, the weird way. For a moment, the room was silent but for the crackle of frost still clinging to the walls. Then Ice King straightened, eyes narrowing with sudden interest. Weird way, huh? His grin split wide. I like the sound of that, hit me with your weirdest, stranger danger. PB's grip tightened on her dress, her mind spun with calculations, but none of her formulas accounted for this. A man cloaked in black fire, negotiating with a mad wizard, smiling like he had all the time in the world. And worse than that, she realized, against her better judgment, she wanted to see what he would do. The Ice King flared with manic energy, frost swirling at his fingertips, when Naruto rose slowly from his cross-legged seat. The black chakra around him hissed like a living fire, but instead of attacking, the blonde simply smirked, his head tilting in mischievous amusement. You picked the weird way, he said. Don't say I didn't warn you. PB's fingers twitched at her side. What could possibly be weirder than what I've already seen? Naruto pressed his hands together in a sudden, sharp clap, the air vibrated, chakra flared. Then came the puff of smoke, dense, white, curling in waves across the cracked floor. From within it, figures emerged, not one, not two, but an entire horde. PB's eyes went wide, Finn audibly choked. Dozens of versions of Naruto appeared, but not as he had been. No, these duplicates were transformed, shimmering with curves, scant clothing, long hair falling over sly eyes. Multiple female version of Naruto. Looking similar to him, loosely anyway. Each one radiated confidence, striking exaggerated poses that would have been laughable if they weren't so distracting. Perverse style, harem jutsu. PB felt heat crawl up her face before she could stop it. What kind of technique is this? Finn slapped both hands over his cheeks, face turning bright red. The Ice King froze midair, his jaw going slack, crown tilting sideways. His nose twitched, then his entire face went crimson. A second later, a geyser of blood shot from his nose. The gust of red blasted him backward like a cannonball. He screamed incoherently as the force sent him crashing through the wall of the castle, then spiraling into the open sky. His voice faded into the distance, still shrieking, until nothing but silence remained. The transformed Narutos vanished in puffs of smoke, leaving the real one doubled over with laughter. He slapped the ground, wheezing between gasps. Pfft, ha, every single time. The black shroud rippled, and PB's sharp eyes caught it, shifting into a flickering chart. Columns of numbers tallied in glowing crimson, and though she didn't understand its language, the meaning was clear. Naruto pointed at it, still laughing. See, every person I meet picks the weird way. Why, what's wrong with people? The chakra pulsed like it was answering, his grin stretched even wider. Yeah, you're right. Guess they would want to see how it plays out. He tipped his head back and let out another roar of laughter, wild and unrestrained, filling the ruined throne room with its echo. PB's blush deepened despite herself, and her nails dug into her palm. What was that? She demanded silently. As if sensing her thought, Naruto's fox-like eyes snapped to hers, sharp, golden, slit-pupilled. For a beat, her breath caught in her throat. Then he cracked up all over again. That was all me, he said, wiping a tear from his eye. Perfect little trick for taking out any kind of pervert, back in the day, even I couldn't resist it if someone else pulled it on me. His grin turned cheeky. Almost smug, but I guess I got too shameless for that to work now. PB pressed her lips together, she didn't like the sound of that at all. Not the implication, not the ease with which he admitted it, not the fact that her own face was still burning. But worse than that, it only made her questions multiply. Who was this man? What was that bizarre technique he called a jutsu? What effect would his presence have on on the Candy Kingdom, on her? Naruto fell back onto the floor, still laughing until he was nearly breathless, one hand on his stomach, the other brushing his hair out of his face. His wild amusement filled the shattered hall, echoing against broken walls, wrapping around her thoughts no matter how she tried to dismiss it. And all she could do was stand there, caught between exasperation and something else she couldn't yet name, as his laughter refused to stop. That's it for today. I hoped you liked the video. Please like and subscribe, and comment ideas if you can, and maybe you could share this with your friends, because you never know, they might like what ifs too. So without further ado, All Kage, out.